Call the Board of Regents meeting back to order. We just had an awesome tour of the Life Sciences building in Vancouver that is not only reflective of our area here, but of our commitment to equity in the design and the construction. And it was so exciting to be a part of that and to see that. So I appreciate everyone that ensured that we had a little time for that tour. I am going to go ahead and turn this meeting over to Regent Shetler for the Strategic and Operational Excellence Committee.
Thank you, Regent Schauer. Appreciate that. Welcome everyone to the Board of Regents Strategic and Operational Excellence Committee meeting. Our first item will be presented by Executive Vice President for Finance and Administration, our CFO, Leslie Bernelli, and focus on Washington resident undergraduate tuition affordability.
Good afternoon. Thank you. And we're also joined by Chris Hoyt and Saichi Oba, who I believe is on the screen. Saichi, can you let us know that you're able to speak?
Thank you.
Great, fantastic. So we brought this discussion forward for you today as an offshoot of the discussion that we had back in September when we talked about tuition as an information item. And what we'd like to do today is to place frame where our tuition is in terms of affordability, particularly for the resident undergraduates at Washington State University. You'll see information that is system level, but we'll also talk a little bit more about Pullman in particular. I'm going to put the budget into context of how important our tuition dollars are to the institution for the budget, as we'll also turn it over to Chris to talk about market competition, particularly inside the state, and how it relates to net price. And we're first going to ask Saichi to give some information about the amount of aid that is available to our resident undergraduates. Saichi.
Thank you, Leslie. Good afternoon, Regents, President Schultz. Access and affordability, two tenets for enrollment management. We know to make programs accessible at WSU, we need to help students with the affordability question. Washington State has one of the most generous need programs in the country, the Washington College Grant. There are full-time awards, part-time awards, over $11,500 for students who go full-time, over $1,100 for students who go part-time. College-bound students, these are students that meet minimum financial thresholds, are identified by the Washington Student Achievement Council, WASAC. Those students are eligible for an additional $500 award. And then there are students who are not college-bound in the state who meet another financial threshold. We offer them a bridge grant also of $500 with their Washington College Grant. Next slide, please. Outcomes of the affordability efforts. I wish we could take credit in enrollment management for this first bullet. We can't. Resident undergraduate tuition is only $102 more than it was a decade ago. This is largely because the state of Washington has certain parameters on how much tuition can be raised, and then the president and you, the regents, decide on that band that they provide. However, there are benefits of watching tuition this closely at the state level. Resident undergrads at WSU who pay no tuition has increased from 31% in 2014 to 34% in 2023. The number of undergraduates who pay full tuition has dropped from 42% in 2014 to 35% in 2023. Overall, about 3/4 of our undergraduates receive some type of financial aid. Next slide, please. Here's something really important and that we track all the time because loan debt is so closely tied to affordability. In 2023, this is the first time students who graduated with loans fell below 50% in over a decade. And this is from a high of 64% in fiscal year of 15. So that 49%, first time it's dropped below 50% in 10 years. Of those students with debt, the amount was $20,288. This is $3,000 less than the national average and down about $4,200, $4,500 from fiscal year 16. Interestingly, Chronicle of Higher Ed conducted a survey in fall of 23, about a month and a half ago. They asked people, what is the maximum amount of loan debt a student should have who's pursuing a 4-year degree? Overwhelmingly, the response was $20,000 should be the maximum amount a student has to take out for their 4-year degree. We're right there with our $20,288 average debt. Next slide. So this graph shows the change in financial aid to all undergraduates, both resident and non-resident, over the last 5 years. The most significant change is represented in that dark gray bar. That is loan volume taken by students. So in 2018, you can see how high the bar is on the left side of the screen. As you work your way to the right, the bar drops gradually until we're at 2023, and that bar is now the lowest that it's been in 5 years. Taking out loans was the number one way students helped pay for their college education in 2018. In 2023, it's dropped down, and now grants are the number one way students help pay their education at WSU. Next slide.
Before you go on.
Saichi, we have a question in the room, Regent
Okay.
Redmond.
Yeah, so when you look at the bars, grant, scholarship, waiver, loan, work study, et cetera, which of those hits our bottom line as an expense or as a lack of revenue versus which of them comes as a source of revenue in lieu of cash tuition or cash tuition?
Great question. Grants are real dollars that we receive with the students. Those come in real dollars. Scholarships can be both. Those can come in from internal sources like the foundation, but from other sources that the student brings with them. So those are dollars as well. Waivers are not. That is the loss of revenue. So those are not real dollars that we offer to students to incentivize their enrollment. So it's actually shown on the balance sheet as a revenue, but it's correspondingly expense to wash out. Loans, of course, are real dollars, and loans take two forms. Loans cover their cost of instruction, but loans also go back into the pockets of our students for their living expenses. So there is an overage that they receive to maintain their living throughout their time. And then work study is dollars actually to the student for their work on campus.
Right. Okay. So it looks like waivers and work study would be the major ones to look at, to be aware of from our standpoint.
Well, work study is heavily subsidized by the federal government, so we receive dollars in for that, and then we provide a portion, but they are also doing work on campus that we need students to do as well. So waivers are really that's foregone revenue.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Saichi, you ready for me to move forward?
Please. Further outcomes of affordability efforts. The full impact of the Washington College Grant has not been experienced, not been realized, primarily because the grant has been in place for 3 years. So next year, we should graduate our first cohort of students who receive the grant all 4 years. So we should see further declines in those who take out loans and further declines in the amount of those loans. So that's sort of what we're getting at about the grant not fully being realized yet. These next bullets are just examples of families or the types of situations, financial situations that students might find themselves in which the grant will still apply. A family of 4 with an income of $73,000 or less, a student from that family would receive the entire $11,586 grant. Public college tuition would be free for a student from a family of 3 who had only a single parent earning $28 an hour. And then finally, middle income families, those grants are going to be lower. Yet even a family of 4 earning up to $112,500 a year will get some type of help through the Washington College Grant, most likely a partial college grant. Next slide. So financial aid, it's an interesting area of enrollment because it's one of those areas where we have to reach out to both prospective students and continue to work with current students. Most of enrollment management, at least on the front end, is working with prospective students and transitioning them to WSU. Financial aid is one of those areas that it has to work throughout the entire life cycle of the student, from prospective right through graduation. How we do this is primarily through communications, through activities, both digital and print. There are activities both on campus and in the community that financial aid does. They also have their own scheduling office. They have their own communication center. This work is nonstop because if there's one area families have questions on, it's financial aid. We just held a program outside of Washington. It was down in the Bay Area in conjunction with the foundation. The number one question we had was how to afford an education coming from California as a non-resident. We actually had our AVP down there with us, Joyce Curry, and she was the most popular person in the room at each presentation we did. Financial aid continues to be the number one issue when we talk to students. Next slide, please. This is just a continuation of the effort, but there's a couple of things we're doing differently in the last 2 years. One, we didn't put on the slide, but we are sending some of our communications out in Spanish to families whose first language is not English. We've hired and we've had on staff that are multilingual, that can speak Spanish. And then we've dedicated a part of our web infrastructure for financial aid for Spanish assistance. And obviously, the goal here is to help more families, more first-generation students, more students who are looking at us that need more help to go to school because of financial aid and the help we need with that. Now, most of this effort, the reason we said it was started 2 years ago, we held a meeting in the Multicultural Student Center at WSU in Pullman. And the number one thing current students told us, was that so many of the documents we send to them that they were having a hard time explaining to their parents what it meant, students whose language wasn't English. And so in the last 2 years, we've identified financial aid literature, admissions literature that we are now sending out, both an English version and a Spanish version. Just one more way we're trying to make this a little more accessible for students. I think this is my last slide, Leslie, so I'm going to stop here.
Great. We have some questions in the room, Saichi. Regent Dickinson?
So I think just it's obviously a foregone assumption, but just for clarification, that all of those opportunities, like she's speaking to, only come with a successful completion of FAFSA. And a successful completion of FAFSA is not an easy thing to do. It is very difficult. Just when you thought you kind of understood the financial aid form, they went and changed it this last year and made it that much more complicated. And so I can't stress the completion of it. And it's really, really challenging if it's a senior in high school or even a junior in high school coming to complete FAFSA in a high school gym with their parents, who perhaps maybe have not, have all their tax records in order. I mean, it is a process that there's a reason we're 48th in the country, or maybe we bumped up to 47th or 46th for completion. But just as a shameless plug, STCU, my credit union, this is our passion, is helping communities that we serve complete FAFSA. And so we will do 47 FAFSA events where we keep our branches open at night, and we've certified 60 of our employees to understand how to complete it. And we find that families feel more comfortable coming into a financial institution and sharing their financial information versus a high school gym with a high school counselor and other members of community perhaps are present. So Saichi, I would just ask that we continue. I know we're working closely with our Tri-Cities location, and we're going to be hosting 5 events in Pasco. And we, in each of those locations, we do have a bilingual person present to be able to assist, because this is a barrier to education, is actually the very thing that's not supposed to be, is one of the single biggest barriers.
Well, thank you for that reminder, Regent Dickinson. And just an irony, just to build on this point, the new FAFSA is titled the Simplified FAFSA, and it's probably anything but. And then to make matters a little more complex, we have not been given the actual date the FAFSA will be released.
Right.
Right now, the Department of Ed has indicated it will be released before December 31, 2023, which provides no planning at all. And what we're trying to do, just to get ahead of this, is we have tools we can provide to students and the public that will help them so that when the FAFSA is released and they do make a workshop such as yours or workshop that WSU has, the tools that we can release ahead of time, financial aid estimators, scholarship estimators, can all be used to complete the FAFSA. So, but thank you for your reminder of the work that you're doing.
Well, and that education for kids that are really actually entering into high school in the 9th grade, to start educating parents around what has to happen to be able to actually complete it from a financial records position. Because what we're seeing, there's so many families have to go back and do quite a bit of work to be able to get to the end of the line there. So
I wonder if there's a possibility, I'm sure you guys are starting to experiment with using generative AI to fill out some forms. I wonder if there isn't a
we
possibility
have
of
a team
scaling
working
that.
on that right now, but in our infinite wisdom of how we create things, this is so complicated that even our AI folks are kind of perplexed by just the password process. And getting through the password process is so complicated. So.
Are there any other questions about affordability for Saichi before we move on? We can always come back. Don't go anywhere, Saichi. You've seen some of these slides before about how important tuition is in our budget. Right now, tuition makes up 39% of our dollars that we have allocable. And of that, the majority of that, the vast majority, comes from our undergraduate. We don't have a slide, but of the undergraduate amount, about 75% of it is resident undergraduate. So critically important is our Washington undergrads. The graduate portion here, this does not exactly correlate well with enrollment. There are more than 5% of our students that are grad students, but they are heavily subsidized to be here via their stipends and other graduate assistantships. So our undergraduates really are our payers at the university. Those dollars that we receive in from our tuition and really all of our core budgets are allocated primarily to salaries and fringe. And you've heard us say this before, the vast majority of our expenditures are personnel. So our dollars go out in the form of the individuals who work at the university. The challenge with that, of course, is that when we receive dollars from the state for new raises, they only provide about 66% of that. So about 2/3 of what we need comes in from the state. Chris, correct me if I'm wrong. That's right. He gave me the thumbs up. So there is an expectation already that the state knows that we are only giving you a portion of the dollars you need for your pay increase. Therefore, you do need to make that up either through tuition increases or reductions in other places or different sources of revenue. And that's always a challenge with the state. The impact in this current year is pretty significant. So for our classified staff, we were funded for 4% increases that began on July the 1st. But if we only use the portion of state dollars that we received for our AP and our faculty, our raise would have been 2.3%. So we used additional dollars from the university from tuition to bring that up to 2.5%. Now that's still a far cry from 4% that our classified staff received, and that we have heard that significantly this year. Going into the next year, the second year of the biennium, we have dollars from the state for 3% for our classified staff. Right now, we only have 1.6 for our AP and faculty. And so we were working to try to close that gap to bring that up some more. A quick reminder, the Higher Education Price Index, a corollary to the CPI each year. You can see this has changed pretty significantly since 2014, and we'll show you how we have raised tuition. But you'll see this inflationary environment that started late 2021 has impacted our spending power as the university. So our costs are going up, and this is a different market basket of goods from the CPI. This is primarily employees, personnel and fringe, but it's also things that the university purchases: library books, lab materials, course materials. Also, utilities weighs heavily in this, and utilities has been very, very volatile in the last 18 months or so, and that's impacted this. So when our tuition does not increase at least by the HEPI, that means our spending power is reduced and we are having to make reductions. Now, at Washington State, we're having to make more reductions in the last 2 years because our enrollment has also come down at the same time that inflation has risen. Just a recap of since the legislative cap was put in place in 2017-18, you can see the maximum amount that the state allowed. 3 of those years, we chose to have a tuition increase that was below the cap. Remember, the cap is only for the resident undergrad. So we do have flexibility to raise the non-resident or any of the graduate programs or any of the professional programs. This applies only to our resident undergrad. If you look at those 3 years that we chose to be below the cap for affordability, if you add that up and continue that forward, we have left 1% of tuition on the table. You heard Saichi say that our tuition right now is $102 more than it was back in 2017-18. If we had been at the cap rate, it would be another $110 more. That $110 is $2 million to the institution. And here is a depiction of what the tuition has looked like. I know it's an eye chart and a lot of info, but if you look back to 2010, 2011, during the height of the Great Recession, that was when state appropriations were leaving in very, very large dollars. We lost 50% of our state appropriation over a period of time. And you can see institutions responded by raising tuition in significant double-digit ways. So 14, 16, 16. But then there's a reckoning in 2013, you'll see, where tuition is not raised for 2 years. And then you see that their tuition actually was reduced 5% 1 year and 10% the second year. The good news about that reduction is the state backfilled it. So they actually gave us state dollars to make up for the fact that we took our tuition down. And then you see the impact of the cap since 2017. And what we are proposing, which we'll talk about later today in Finance and Administration, the 3% increase for next year. And that's how that translates to dollars. And you can see this year, the $10,976 tuition compared to where it was in 16-17. That's the $102 difference that Saichi pointed out. It's probably easier to look at this in this way. You can see tuition back at 2012 at $10,874, and where we have been now, we are asking to bring that up to $11,305, and that's been the history of those increases. Now I'm going to turn it over to Chris to talk a little bit about our competition and how our net price relates to the other institutions in the state of Washington.
Okay, so we talk a lot about our peers and our comparison to our peers. And here in this environment, from a system level, we look at this in terms of who do we compete with and who are our market competitors. So really this chart just shows us the public baccalaureates in the state of Washington. This is the combination of the tuition and the mandatory fees that each of the public baccalaureates, this is, I guess, what we would call their sticker price. The number you see there for WSU is really reflective of the tuition and mandatory fees for WSU Pullman. Vice President Brunelli is going to talk about fees in a moment, so she can talk a little bit more about that. But many of those, as you know, are voted on by our students. So another way to look at affordability is to consider the net price for our average students. And so net price is both the sticker price, so your tuition, your fees, but then also estimates of things like housing, the total cost of, transportation, books, supplies, and so on. And so it tells you something about what the average student pays after student aid is deducted. So in other words, we take the total cost to get to total cost of attendance. It is just tuition and fees, estimates of books, and all of those other costs, and then subtracting the aid. And so I'll talk about UW here in just a moment, because I think the obvious question is why is University of Washington so low? But when we look at where our students are going in the state, putting UW aside for a moment, and when you look at net price, we lose more students to Western Washington, yet there is a higher net price there between WSU and Western Washington University. So these are all of our market competitors in the state. Part of the question that anybody would ask about this chart here is, why is University of Washington's net price so low? And we can surmise some reasons for that when you go back and you look at the makeup of the student body, University of Washington brings in more non-resident students, international students, who do pay a much higher tuition rate. They also have a much larger endowment that they can draw upon to subsidize the education, the undergraduate education. Again, looking at this is looking at the average price, net price for resident undergraduate students. So we can surmise a lot from just their makeup of their student body compared to ours, and what their non-resident tuition is compared to our tuition.
Chris, would there be any factorization in that, if this is largely driven by Pullman with the UW from a commuter standpoint, that there's a large population that are not paying for housing? Is that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know the answer to that. I'm not sure if any of my colleagues know the answer to that and whether that is driven by that, but Saichi might be able to. Did you hear the question, Saichi, whether or not that cost, the lower cost might be as a result of transportation costs, and whether commuter student or housing, and whether commuter students contribute to that lower cost?
I heard the question. Unfortunately, I don't have an answer, but I'll get an answer.
We can follow up on that. It's a good question. Other questions about that?
But we do think that we do have data. We're not just guessing that they are funneling their extra out of country, out of state tuition dollars to subsidize their in-state undergraduates.
Yes, we can see their iPads information, which breaks down all of their tuition by student.
Right.
Their tuition is far more than their sticker price when you look at it that way. So that's being pulled in from the international students and from the out of state. They don't discount their out of state student. That's like a lot of institutions do. We know Oregon is drawing a lot from the nearby area. Washington doesn't have to do that.
Right.
They have the draw, and therefore they keep their tuition high.
Yeah, no, I know that, but I'm just wondering if we know that that's where, I'm just wondering, and we know this number is real, so we know that.
Yes.
We know that this is being bought down somehow.
Yeah.
Right, we do, and all institutions are required to, these are published, they are required to publish these on their websites. And again, it is drawn from our iPads data, so that is data that we can look at really for any institution in terms of net price.
Yes, ma'am.
You may have said this, but the other thing, the distinguishing characteristic of UW is that about 35% of their students are non-resident,
Yes.
Yeah.
whereas we have about 15%
Right,
on
yeah.
our campus. So they have a much larger group who are paying much higher tuition.
Right.
This is only in state, so
Yeah,
right.
one
Yeah.
can surmise that that's exactly where those funds are.
I guess I have a question about, we have this conversation every year contextually. Have we applied a proactive strategy that we would look back on and say it worked or it didn't work, or how do we face into this and deal with it proactively and help Saichi with the story. Because optically, as a parent, I'm shopping around and I see this. And then I just might set it aside because I don't know how to get through FAFSA and all that jazz, and it's easier to just go to another place. So I guess it's sort of a lessons learned question. How have you dealt with this in the past?
When there's a strong assumption that a lot of our residents or undergraduate residents are getting into the UW, and that's not a fair assumption either, right?
That's
They're just not as accessible as one might think.
Right.
Yeah, but they still could save $20,000 over 4
Yes,
years
with-
by
but
making
at
one of the
Eastern.
other choices.
Yeah, the EWU or Central, yeah.
Right.
Okay, so this last slide here is just, and this speaks a little bit to Regent Redmond's question. This is looking at the institutional aid, just breaking it down between grants and scholarships and waivers. And again, back to your question earlier, waivers being an unfunded commitment. So looking from 2013 to 2023, you can see that, you know, grants and scholarships being the, and I'm gonna look at what color of line, that is the flatter line. I guess it's a black line. It's not that high of a contrast, but that's remained relatively flat. Those are backed by I guess actual dollars or real dollars, whereas the waivers, use of waivers has increased significantly over that time. So this is just really to show you the comparison of that, and you might look at 2020 and that line going down, but that's also correlated with the fact that enrollment has also decreased during that time. So in sum, back to that question about how you look at that strategically, if you accept that the total cost of attendance or the net price is a way to look at this, yes, you can surmise there are a number of ways with which to look at affordability and how institutions may have determined to lower that or to be able to manage that. And it certainly is much more of a complex than looking at any one of these factors, but those are all part of the conversation in order to determine which direction to go, what's the right way to go.
And I did want to
Oh,
point.
there was one question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I wanted to ask a little more about how our waivers work. Do we say to somebody, you know, your tuition is 12,000, but we're going to waive 4 and still get the 8? Or do we say, we're waiving the 12,000, here you go?
Saichi, can you answer that?
I can. There are some programs that we waive a portion of tuition. I'm not aware of a program, I'm racking my brain right now, where we would waive the entire cost of tuition. The largest waiver we offer would be to high achieving non-residents. And what we offer them would be the equivalent of what's called the Western Undergraduate Exchange, which is a discount so that their total tuition is now about 150% of resident tuition. That's the largest, and that amount in real dollars or in real waiver money is, I believe, about $11,000.
But they're still paying more than the resident undergrad.
Right, so the waivers are complicated in the sense that we're forgoing some revenue. but
In
we
order
are-
to incent some revenue, exactly.
So it's hard to figure out exactly what they're doing for us. They're
Well-
doing more than it would appear. Potential.
Yes. And that's, you know, given the
That's the
population,
population.
that's the market you're trying to bring in, is the non-resident population who is willing to pay more. I wanted to point out the difference between the University of Washington tuition and mandatory fees and Washington State's mandatory fees, and that is a Pullman number. You can see the tuition number, strictly just tuition, but also the mandatory fees that are added on. That's how we end up being more than the University of Washington. But Chris mentioned this just a moment ago. You can see that some of those fees have student input into them. Everything that you see in orange has been through a student referendum process. So you can see that the students have input into the student rec fee, the union fee, and Pullman, the Chinook fee, transportation, stadium fee, media, and the food pantry. And here in Tri-Cities, the student union fee and the safety and transportation fee as well. So that has a direct impact on what the student is paying as well. Those are added into the cost of attendance.
So can you go back, so the differential between our two,
Right there.
these are sticker prices, right?
Yes, that's correct.
But I thought the earlier sticker price was quite a bit differentiated. That was because it had all the things.
It's
in
the
it?
cost of attendance. Yes, that includes the housing, include the average housing, the average transportation, the average supplies.
And that's
Yeah,
because
yes.
we think we have a lot of the commuter students at UW.
Yeah.
So that's kind of not a good apples to apples.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, right, 'cause they still have to pay for housing. They're living somewhere.
That's
Somebody's
right,
paying
yeah.
for housing somewhere. Yeah. It's like home funds.
Yeah, that's odd.
So are there any questions about the fee structure? We have Ellen and Kim here who can certainly answer those, put them on the spot. There's a lot of additional material in this packet. We didn't want to overwhelm it with slides, but there's some information about the resident or the non-resident undergraduates and then our graduate students. We also included a comparison just for information of the Pac-12. And I'll just show you that over to the right-hand side here. We are near the bottom of the Pac-12, but that chart is highly, highly correlated for the public institutions to how much state aid they receive per student. So Utah's state aid per student is higher than Washington State's state aid per student. And you can also see our strategic plan peers were in the upper middle of the pack up there. But again, as you've seen in this discussion, it's not easy to look at one simple number and say that's what the comparison is, because it is cost of attendance. It is cost of attendance net of all the aid that may be available. Any questions about this? Yes, ma'am.
I'd just like to say thank you for doing the analysis, because I think you have dug into it quite deeply. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Any other?
I had one just comment or suggestion for back on our sort of putting it on the strategic map, which is that I still feel like we're kind of rearranging the deck chairs, because we're trying to fund our budget, which you showed us that nice pie chart.
Yep.
And we're trying to fund, increases that are keeping up with inflation,
Right.
which is a number that's bigger than what we want to increase tuition by.
Correct.
And of course, we have other things that we're trying to fund that are new and different initiatives, and we have aging infrastructure, and we have a lot of competing
Yes.
needs. So two strategic questions to think about. One is, I was hoping that when we adopted Workday, and I think we're now quite a few years in, I was hoping that we'd start hearing about a shrinking workforce around efficiencies that we could gain because of technology. So that's one thing, so that we'd be able to pay people more because we wouldn't need as many people.
Mhm.
And then second thing is, I feel like this idea that there's an ideal amount of debt that people should be carrying no more than X when you graduate from college. That seems like sort of a weird concept to me in a way, because it's great to get, whatever you can in financial aid from all sorts of different sources, and it's great to work during school and, find all sorts of ways to minimize debt. But it's also great to invest in yourself and get a great job. And I feel like one of the ways that we need to think about reinventing higher ed is think about, what am I investing in? And how do I make a great return on my investment? And that's really kind of the missing part of the equation in higher ed that people are probing when they're making a decision about whether they even go to college. And I would love for us to think more about how can we work on that, and how can we say, not, choose between this university or that university, but choose us because the incremental dollar is going to get you where you want to go. And here's all the evidence about that. And so you might be spending more, but your return is going to be much greater. And so that's the sort of the case that I would like to be making. And there might have to be some sort of putting our money where our mouth is there, and some schools are doing that. But I think really getting beyond marketing on that and getting very concrete on that would be a useful thing to think about.
Offline, I'll talk with you about the workday / efficiency item, because I will say in my very brief time here, I know that we are less staffed across the service side of the house, but I'm not sure the correlation between the efficiency of workday relates to that. I think that's a product of having been through rounds of budget cuts the last several years.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions? All right,
Thank you very much.
thank you.
Well done. So our first information item will be presented by WSU Vancouver Chancellor and the host of our meetings, Mel Netzhammer, and Campus Chief of Staff, Sherry Bennett. They will share an update on the WSU Vancouver strategic plan.
So our strategic plan was developed during COVID. And that meant, first of all, that it was never presented to the Board of Regents. So this is actually the first time that we are having the opportunity midway through this process. And I think it's actually a pretty good time for us to be presenting because really the first part of the plan was having to address the pandemic, and coming out of that, what were things going to look like? And now that we're a couple of years beyond that, we are having the opportunity to think strategically beyond just meeting basic needs of students, beyond just dealing with an enrollment decline of nearly 800 students. And so I think we're in this really good place for us to be talking with the Board of Regents. So in that first 2.5 years, COVID was really central. Now we are having an opportunity to embrace other things, to think about new strategies, to keep it as a living document as we move forward. The entire slide deck is in your packet. We will go through the highlights of that for you today in the presentation, but we wanted you to see the full scope of the plan. And then the last thing that I would say is everything that we have done with this plan has been done through an equity lens. And we wanted you to see the equity lens materials that we use. They're laminated and in front of you, and in our cabinet meetings, we all take them out and put them in front of us. In our strategic planning meetings, we take them out and put them in front of us, and make sure that as we are working through our planning and our leadership more broadly of WSU Vancouver, that we keep equity front and foremost. And with that, I will turn it over to Sherry to talk about the plan itself.
Excellent. Thank you, Mel. Normally, I would be very nervous at the post-lunch strategic planning presentation, but I know that you all are very informed and very engaged in the strategic planning process across the system. So thank you for that, for negating my nerves. I'm very excited to be here. So as Mel mentioned, we have a Vancouver Strategic Planning Coordinating Council, and we're really making a concerted effort to ensure that people across the Vancouver campus, all employees, really really see themselves in our strategic plan. And our strategic planning co-chair, Dr. Sharon Cruz, and myself, during spring of 2024, will be visiting every unit and every college across campus to have those conversations with people, to talk about the plan so they can see themselves represented in it. And definitely will be emphasizing how they see themselves in our enrollment efforts and our retention efforts. Everyone is involved in those two things, whether they see it or not. And our goal by the end of that meeting is to make sure that they do see it. And as Mel mentioned, if we were going to attach a theme to our strategic plan, it would definitely be equity. I see it infused into each of our strategies, and I hope by the end of the presentation that you are able to see it too. So we'll go and talk about the highlights of Goal 1, which is the focus of research. So awarding our partnership-specific mini grants is a new initiative that brings faculty together that have never worked together before. So these new partnerships have a high potential for external funding. An example of one of these partnerships includes neuroscience, biology, and engineering, and they are studying the gut microbiome in zebrafish. And so the engineering faculty, how they're connected to that is that they're the ones designing a new device for this project. In the last year, we have strengthened our partnership with the U.S. Forest Service. So they will be housed on our campus in a space that was made available as a result of the life sciences building being built. And they will expand their research on identifying illegally imported wood. And this partnerships creates research opportunities for graduate students, internships for both graduate and undergraduate students, and brings in additional resources to the campus, such as research dollars, lab techs, et cetera. And then the U.S. Forest Service is also a great example of our internship and research collaborations, as well as our partnership with ABSCI, which is a local company that designs antibodies from scratch using AI and synthetic biology. Moving on to the highlights of Goal 2. So one of our most exciting successes for students is the creation of a physical supplemental learning center. In this space, students are working together and they're providing coaching to one another. And because of this space, we're now able to integrate all of our support services instead of them being spread across campus. So if you're a student and seeking support around writing and math, you'd be able to go to this one space. And the Base Pedagogy Summer Academy will conduct its 5th cohort in 2024. And so each summer, an interdisciplinary group of faculty participate. The Academy provides equity-minded tools and supports implementation of culturally responsive teaching practices. Ultimately, this will help create and impact student success, retention, and a student's sense of belonging. One of the faculty members that participated in this cohort worked to incorporate social justice into her math courses. I think that's really cool that you're getting social equity into your math courses. And then finally, for a highlight of Goal 2, we are so excited to say that on-campus childcare returned in October after shuttering our doors in March of 2020. So we have partnered with Innovative Services Northwest to bring the best services possible to our campus. It was incredibly important to us to be able to provide on-site childcare that was absolutely as affordable as possible for students and the employees of Vancouver. All right, let's move on to Goal 3. So lots of energy and effort goes into the expansion of our admission program strategy. So we participate in Cougar Quick Start and the Guaranteed Admissions Program. With the Guaranteed Admissions Program, we currently receive transcripts from 40% of Washington High School juniors and seniors with GPAs of 3.0 or above. And there was an increase from 40 to 150 Washington school districts now participating. We are also participating in an Aspen Institute cohort with Clark College. So the benefits of this cohort are a strengthened and renewed relationship with Clark, which hopefully will result in successful transfer students that feel a sense of welcoming and belonging here at WSU Vancouver. And you just got to see that beautiful life sciences building. It's on time and it's on budget. How exciting is that? This building embodies the passion of our campus and a focus on equity throughout the planning process. So an example of that would be students have been involved with space utilization and the art that's going on the walls. And the landscaping has been informed by the Native American Community Advisory Board. So Jenny Chambers Taubey, Christine Portfors, and Jason Barlocker have submitted a proposal to the Society for College and University Planning, otherwise known as SCUP, to present their collaborative and equity-focused efforts at SCUP's annual conference. Stay tuned. We'll let you know if that was accepted. And then lastly, for this slide, at the beginning of the strategic plan, we embarked on a $5.4 million growing facility campaign. So the growing facility is adjacent to the life sciences building. Hopefully you just saw it. And to date, we have raised nearly $3 million. We received a $1 million gift from the Cowlitz Indian Tribe and $750,000 from the Murdoch Charitable Trust. So in addition to the monetary gifts, our partnership with each entity has been strengthened and has grown as a result of these efforts. And a special thank you to Regent Keohokalole Shower for making a significant gift to the Life Sciences Building. Thank you, Lisa.
Let me say something about goal 3.
Okay.
So goal 3 is probably the most significant change from our previous plan. In our previous plan that expired in 21, it was just growth. And we were on a growth trajectory and every year having more students. And the idea was we were going to fund the rest of the plan through the growth that we had. And so we wanted a goal around that. What we realized when we went to revise the plan for the current 5 years was that the life sciences building hadn't been in there at all. The possibility of housing, which we discussed this morning, had not been there at all. Philanthropy was not part of any of the strategies that we had. And so when we came back, we realized that there were a number of things that needed to be included in the plan because they were really strategic priorities for the institution that had not really been addressed in the previous plan. And so we decided to expand goal 3 to really make it focus not just on enrollment growth, but the changes to our infrastructure, growth in our philanthropy program. And so it became a more expansive goal that still is how we look at achieving the other goals in the plan.
Great, thanks, Mel. All right, and highlighting goal 4. So we have several new resource and affinity groups, such as PRISM, which supports LGBTQ+ faculty and staff. We have the Hispanic Latinx Staff and Faculty Association, Space for Us, supporting Black faculty and staff, Support and Empowerment for Employees of Color, otherwise known as SEEK, and the Asian Pacific Islander Association. It's not a formalized group, but they do meet informally throughout the year. And with support from the campus director of Native American programs, Julian Ankney, and the Native American Community Advisory Board, we have updated the land acknowledgement for the Vancouver campus. Mel will talk more about that tomorrow during his campus update. Directed funds through the President's Office will be utilized to create and enhance Native American signage on campus. And then several groups are working together currently to create a Native garden. And 1 year ago, Chancellor Netzhammer and Vice Chancellor Ford were in this very room speaking to all of you and presented to this group on the Equity Impact Assessment Tool. And since then, the Office of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion has created a toolkit and has offered training and support on how best to use the tool, including a base workshop offered here in Vancouver. All of campus leadership has received this training, and we have gifts in 3 different sizes for you. So you too can use the tool at future Regent meetings and perhaps in your professional and personal lives. And so Mel mentioned these at the beginning of our presentation. So there's a wallet size, a mid-size, and a full size. And if you just can't get enough of these, Tracy and Joel have more for you if you want to take some with you. So thank you. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the goal number 5. So our professional and corporate education PACE courses have benefited from the increased collaboration with our marketing and communication team and a tiered pricing structure. In 2 semesters, we went from 30 participants to over 150. The classes are a mix of business partners, faculty, and staff. And a joint collaboration between academic affairs and the chancellor's office has resulted in the Community Engaged Scholars Fellowship Program. So these cohorts work with faculty to bring a service learning component to the curriculum. For example, our students are working with the high school students from iTech Prep on this very campus on a project related to biology and food. And then lastly, the Future Leaders Project is a partnership with Workforce Southwest Washington and the Columbia River Economic Development Council. So they connect students from historically underrepresented communities with internship opportunities. We are seeing a significant rise in the number of businesses that want to participate in the Future Leaders Project. So in 2020, we had 4 businesses that were participating, and in 2023, we have 16. Most of those businesses are becoming repeat customers. And finally, the Port of Vancouver has decided to hire 2 interns 2 years in a row because they couldn't make a choice between the fabulous students at WSU Vancouver. Any questions?
Give us an example where you had a policy or something you were looking at, and then you applied the equity lens tool and you changed it.
Yes. Jenny is in the back. Use mine, use mine. Yes, we have, as looking at how we communicate with the campus community, and in light of what has been happening, we have now created a, Jenny, what are we calling it?
Public Safety Advisory Council.
A Public Safety Advisory Council to advise our campus safety, our police officers on campus. We put together a plan for that group, and then actually in a cabinet retreat, it happened to be our example that we went through to apply the equity lens to that group. And as a result of that, the language changed, the charge changed, some of the membership changed to make sure that it had become a more inclusive advisory group than we had originally conceived of when we were putting it together. So that's probably the biggest example of, maybe not the biggest, but a clearest example of how that has happened. We use it in putting together search committees. We use it in putting together position descriptions to make sure that we are looking at that through an equity lens as we put our position descriptions together. So yes, it's important to our campus.
Right. I was just trying to.
Oh yeah, I know.
How you use
Yeah.
it, like how is it benefiting? And those
Yeah.
are great examples. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Other comments or questions?
Question, in terms of this community engagement, what are what's the biggest thing you're hearing from the employer community for what they would like to see that we aren't yet able to provide?
Oh, that's a good question. And Narek left, didn't he? Do you all have that conversation in your?
I know that those conversations are being had. I haven't been privy to them, but.
Yeah, not to avoid your question, but I. Oh, then I will.
I don't know, it's always okay.
Yes. I think, I don't know that we are necessarily hearing that we are not providing specific skill sets for our students, not in the meetings that I am attending. I do think that there is an interest in addressing the changing workforce, and that what does it mean to work from home? What does it mean to be part of a team? I am certain that in fact, one of our legislative earmarks requests, community development grant request, is around AI, because every department is looking at how AI will be integrated in that, and the workforce is interested in that as well. So it's more in that context that I'm hearing about what we're doing. The flip side of that, we had our scholarship event, and Kirk was there, and Aaron Dawson from Opsal Dawson spoke. He supports one of our programs, and he said, I currently have 50 WSU Vancouver graduates, and I will hire everyone if I can. That there are, I think we connect to the community, to local businesses on a regular basis in each of our colleges to make sure that we are addressing their needs as they change.
And then one follow-up question, unrelated. You mentioned, I forget the name of the program, but you mentioned that 150 school districts are now part of the program that's leading to the 3.0 students being directly exposed to immediate admission. How many school districts do we have in total in the state? I just wanted to know what the opportunity for upside there is.
That's a good question. I do not know. I'm not sure if anyone else in the room knows it.
I'm asking the hard questions.
Yes, no. And guaranteed admission is not just a WSU Vancouver project. The all of our campuses, I believe, now participate in guaranteed admissions. It was managed by the Council of Presidents and by the Washington Student Achievement Council.
Seems like it's a lot more than 150, so maybe we can make that number bigger.
I think that's possible, and one of the issues is that to have guaranteed admission, they need to provide us with the data on their students, and not every school district or every school even was either felt that they had the resources to provide that, or felt that they wanted to automatically provide that information to students. And so that's where we've seen some resistance to participating in the program. Sandra, why don't you just tell us?
295.
Charades going on back there.
Yes.
All right, so you got
Yeah.
double the opportunity.
295.
Yeah.
Something like 295. Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
Any other comments or questions?
I'll just make a quick comment that I hope that each of the regions will take the equity impact assessment tool with you, bring it back to every meeting. We can have it digital. I'm hoping that we'll be able to do a bit of a training on this so that we can embed the equity impact assessment tool in our decision making, because certainly at this table, we're able to make decisions that benefit and or can cause maybe challenges for some if we're not really centering this. So I think it's just a great opportunity. I appreciate you bringing it and leaving it for us so that it can be part of the way in which we operate as well.
Sherry, Mel, thank you very much. This is great. Our next presenter is Interim Vice President for the Office of External Affairs and Government Relations, Chris Mueller, who will provide a government affairs update.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the board. Appreciate the time to provide you with a brief government relations update on both the state and federal levels, especially considering this is our last meeting before the 2024 legislative session. I'm going to start with a brief federal update. When we asked for this time, we weren't sure if we would be facing a government shutdown tomorrow. And so I'm happy to report that both houses of Congress have approved a continuing resolution that'll get us into mid-January and early February, which comes as relief to all of our federally funded programs at WSU. The one fly in the ointment, I suppose, is that while existing federally funded programs are going to be able to continue at current funding levels. We had some proposals for new funding that we're going to have to keep an eye on. In particular, our federal relations staff in DC is keeping an eye on proposals around nuclear science, campus safety at the WSU Pullman campus, and indigenous health work in Spokane. One bit of good news I can say is that the Senate added rather uncommonly a couple $1 million to support some of the research we're doing in the College of Veterinary Medicine around livestock breeding. It's not every day that you're going to get new funding in a continuing resolution, so that was positive to see that. Transitioning to the state side, I'm going to focus on our two main operating budget, two largest operating budget requests. You'll recall approving a $2.15 million operating request to add a major in supply chain management to our Vancouver and Everett campuses. We have had positive legislative engagement on that front this interim. And I would say the most notable thing there is that there has been a recognition that there is a problem to be solved. People recall not being able to buy toilet paper or baby formula during the pandemic, recognizing that was a supply chain problem. And so that recognition of there being a problem is helpful, particularly if it doesn't require a ton of explanation. They can lean on their own experiences. We really appreciate the assistance and the work from the Office of Corporate Relations in helping us engage companies that might be interested in this as well. And we expect that you will see support from some large corporations that you are familiar with. And also we expect to be on the legislative agendas in the community legislative agendas in both Snohomish and Clark counties. And I would also note that we've most notably secured the support and help from the Washington Technology Industry Association, which is really active in Olympia and really involved in examining the funds that go into the Washington Education Investment Account, which is where funds to pay for this program would likely come from. We also want to offer a special thanks to Regent Ramos for her patience and help in kind of working with us as we have refined our proposal and how to talk about it. And so that's greatly appreciated. The second item I want to mention on the state side, you'll recall that we submitted a request for Climate Commitment Act funds to help WSU be more competitive in the state's carbon allowances auctions that have been going on and witnessing prices that far exceed initial expectations. Just to refresh your memory, the Climate Commitment Act is the state's version of a cap and invest decarbonization plan. In the process of working this particular request, an opportunity has presented itself to possibly get a start on a long-term compliance plan, carbon reduction and compliance plan. For your background, only the WSU Pullman campus is a quote-unquote covered entity under the Act, and that is due exclusively to the presence of 2 natural gas-fired steam plants that heat the campus and drive our carbon profile. And so any long-term strategy to reduce emissions is going to have to ultimately replace the steam plants as our primary heating source. And so we have been invited to develop a concept by a couple of key legislators in the House and Senate involved in drafting and implementing the Climate Commitment Act that could entail notable capital investment to get started on that replacement. We're actually meeting with them tomorrow to refine our concept. One significant unknown that we have is that there are, as you may be aware, signatures being collected for a initiative to the legislature to repeal the Climate Commitment Act, and those signatures are due next month. And one possibility is that if there are enough signatures collected to put it on the November 2024 ballot, that may create a chilling effect in the legislature to actually spend available Climate Commitment Act funds. So that's something we're going to be monitoring as well.
Chris, I'm getting a lot of feedback that they think that they're going to be successful in getting enough of those. Are you hearing that as well? That it's highly likely that we will see that back on the ballot, or?
I am hearing that as well. So we're going to proceed with developing our concept. We hope to get some feedback tomorrow, and we'll see how things developed, particularly as we get a sense for whether the legislature is going to, spend this money. I will note, this is the one pot of money in Olympia where there's a lot of it, and everybody knows it, and it's been spent 20 times over in people's imaginations. And so I think the one thing that we would have going for us, or would be a selling point for us, is what we're talking about is directly responsive to the Climate Commitment Act in terms of putting money towards something that's going to reduce emissions. And so, we'll have more to share on that in the future.
I personally sit on 3 boards that have submitted the exact same request in the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars, because we have a brand new building that's gold LEED certified that does not meet the Climate Commitment Act at this time.
I would note the state capitol campus in Olympia is heated by a steam plant. So that's
Just a little
part
side
of
note.
the state's problem is we've got a pig and a python problem, multiple pigs and a single python. Let's put it that way. Any other questions on that one? Finally, I'm just going to note, many of you, of course, saw the announcement last week that U.S. Representative Derek Kilmer from the Olympic Peninsula will not be seeking re-election. Representative Kilmer has been a friend of WSU, both in Washington, D.C. and during his time in the legislature. This is obviously creating trickle-down effects. So State Public Lands Commissioner Hillary Franz has already announced that she'll be seeking the seat. Just this morning, Emily Randall, who is the chair of the State Senate Higher Education Committee, announced she'll be seeking the seat as well. And there are others who are giving it strong consideration. And so we'll be watching that closely. And of course, this is just the beginning. There will be much more of this to come, but a big first early domino to fall. That's my report, Mr. Chair.
Any other comments or questions for Chris?
Just a quick, do we know anything about what Derek is doing?
I've not seen anything.
I've not reached out to him or anything, but just curious.
I worked for him once upon a time, and I'm tempted to find out myself.
You should.
Yeah.
Let us know if you know.
Thank you very much. So next we have our Chief Compliance and Risk Officer, Cheryl Comerzel. She'll give us a semi-annual compliance and risk management update.
Awesome. This is gonna move my slides. Good afternoon. Great to be here. Thanks. So last time I reported, I focused a lot on compliance activities. We're going to start this one with the enterprise risk management. And then we're going to look at some of those high-risk items on our top risks that have management elements in my unit, the compliance unit for the university, and just talk to a little bit about some of the mitigation efforts and things we are doing in that space. And then we will look at overall system compliance issues. Questions at any time always make this more interesting for me and hopefully for you. So without further ado, we'll just get going. Okay, so the Enterprise Risk Management Program, I've been in front of you a few times now. It is growing. We are learning as we implement it. We initially started with a risk register that had over 100 risks on it. identified from that top risks and have presented that to you in one formal session. What we have found at this point in time is that giving our staffing and capacity on this, and actually sort of, we need the maturity of our risk register needs to improve. We need to look at it in a larger sort of umbrella fashion. And we have gone through the process of revisiting with all of our risk owners, all of our risks, thinking about how we can group them in a way that is more meaningful to both you as a board and our leadership in terms of making strategic decisions and supporting and making it a tool that is useful for budgeting, planning, decision-making processes. That will be coming to you in the next year. But right now, this year, what we have done is we re-ranked our top risks, and I'll be sharing that next. And we're also working with multiple groups across campus, and really thank you to Chris Hoyt and her team who are working to help coordinate the timing, looking at how we can time our planning with the rest of the major planning efforts on campus to make them complement one another and make it more meaningful for the whole institution. So this is this year's top risks. On the right-hand side is where they were last year. We re-ranked them. And we also provided everybody with an opportunity to identify new risks that should be considered top risks for the institution as we go forward for this year. And over on the right-hand side, you'll see what the top risks are across the country for, as reported by United Educators. So the new risks are on the bottom. I've heard a few questions about some of these today and or references to some of these items today. Generative AI, obviously a risk that people are looking at around the country. Clery Act compliance, which is something we highlighted for you in my last presentation, and I'm going to be giving you an update on that as well. Employee morale came out of a couple of different surveys that were done. And highlighted that across both of those surveys, across a wide variety of constituents. And then financial reporting is a risk that Leslie has identified as she has come into WSU, and we've added that at the end as well. One thing that we can see on this list is how this will be changing in the future. For example, if you look at items 8 and 9, deferred maintenance and building infrastructure in the new register, which will be coming to you next year, those will be a singular risk. And that will correspond more consistently with how those risks are also identified by United Educators, looking at facilities and deferred maintenance, for example, on their list. So that is what is to come. Any questions about what's on this list, why it's there, or the process at this point? All right. So looking at some of our top risks and what we're doing that are in the compliance realm. So I talk, every time I think I'm in front of you, I talk a little bit about Title IX and harassment and discrimination. This is a top risk for us. This is one graph that shows one of the reasons why it is a top risk for us. This is our 6-year loss history from our state insurance pool. And what it really shows here is that if you look at just the dark blue year to year, that is our loss history for employment-related claims, and almost all of our employment-related claims are have some harassment and discrimination element in them. We are doing almost all of the mitigation efforts that United Educators has identified for Title IX, for discrimination and harassment at large. We've implemented a lot of changes in the past couple of years. This is something that I think that it will always be a top risk, I expect. We will always be mitigating it, and we will always be working to improve. So we constantly are looking at what we can do to change here, working with our colleagues in HRS, working with our colleagues in the provost office on the academic side, and across the institution, making sure that we're improving our training opportunities. That's where a big focus has been in the past year. And there's just any number of things that can be done here and that we are looking to do here. But this is one way to illustrate why this is a risk, as well as just for making our campus a safer and better place to work and learn. Another risk that's identified on our top risk, it's the number 20, but is international engagement. And then international risk management is sort of, from my perspective, a sub-risk under that. I thought this would be actually a timely thing to spend a little bit of time talking about, given the current state of international affairs. We finally, at this point in time, are at a place where when we learned of what was happening, for example, in the Israel and Palestine conflict, we were able to check immediately in our Workday benefit, actually, in Workday, to see if we had any staff or students there because of the new travel registration requirements. We have started to implement a much more systematic travel, international travel registration process and education process about what our insurer would provide, because in fact, if we had had anybody there, and we didn't, we would have stepped in immediately, coordinated with our insurer for evacuation assistance for them. We also have a new travel policy that, and this is in our next one. We have a new travel policy that will require the registration I've talked about, in information that will be going out to all employees who are traveling internationally. That is something that we are still in the process of coordinating through Workday with the team there, but it's not something we could have done previous to this. And it also is a requirement that is coming out of the federal government and will be implemented in the next year. So a definite benefit of our system improvements. We will be rolling out in risk management, an international risk management webpage. Right now, it has been the extent to which we manage international risk and all of our international activities has been sort of unit by unit. And so we'll be seeking to help coordinate that for our, and this is primarily for all the work other than study abroad, because our study abroad program does have a robust risk management program around it. But this is for activities where we're looking to go into foreign countries for research, for standing up potential programs, and for individuals who may be looking to work from a foreign country. What are the risks that we have to look at in those situations? And of course, they, depending on what we're doing and depending on where we're going, it's a whole different set of questions. So that, what we're doing on the international risk management side. And the next one I wanted to highlight was just Clery Act compliance, because it is a new risk that is on the register. And we have presented to you on the internal audit findings on that. We had a new system-wide Clery committee. That group has been meeting regularly and been doing phenomenal work. We do now have a position dedicated to Clery compliance, which in this current budget atmosphere, I am super grateful for. It is something that not only helps with our overall compliance activity, but I think when we are able to better report out on Clery compliance, one thing that we have as a selling point at this institution, I believe, is our overall safety. And this will help to highlight that as well. And continuing to improve training and resources for all individuals on the Clery committee, as well as individuals who are, have reporting obligations under Clery. So it's been a busy space. Okay, so looking now at overall compliance for the institution, all this slide shows you is those items that are high risk that have a compliance element to them. So as you can see, about the only one that doesn't have a legal or regulatory compliance element is employee morale. In other words, compliance is everywhere in our world. And we do a bit of everything. And we are undertaking in the Central Compliance Office a survey of all of the compliance offices across the whole system and looking at all the laws that are out there, which right now, there's a central resource that identifies 293. There's more, but that's a good place to start. We have 71 major areas, statutes, laws that we are looking at and needing to refine and identify which office. It's not that we're not complying with them. It's that usually for most of those, there's compliance elements in multiple offices, and it's not clear which office is ultimately responsible for compliance in that particular statutory instance. So this is just, I always find this a kind of an interesting slide because higher education is a super complex area. We do a little bit of everything. You know, we got PCI compliance, we've got SEC compliance, actually, we've got athletics compliance, you know, we have everything. And I just talked about international risk. We got international compliance. I mean, in some of it we do a lot of, some of it we do a little bit of, but even those little bits require a significant amount of compliance. We provide healthcare. We're into healthcare billing with Medicare and Medicaid. So I mean, it is complex. We have experts all over, and there's always more coming from the federal government. In fact, I thought it interesting, Regent Redmond, that you were asking in the earlier presentation, sort of about financial value and transparency for degree programs, because there's a whole new set of federal regulations on that very issue that I'm going to a training on at the end of this month, but will basically require all secondary institutions to report various information to the U.S. Department of Education, including the earnings of graduates, and report that out publicly. It's going to be an enormous change to and workload addition to several of our offices. It's basically kind of a whole new world for higher education in many regards. So I'm sure I will be back providing more information on that to all of you in the future, but we have that to look forward to.
Well, that's actually a really interesting one, because given everything that I've ever heard from the employer community, and we just heard a little bit from Mel a minute ago, employers love our graduates. And I would suspect that our graduates do very well in the workforce and tend to be employed more of the time than your average graduate. They seem to be highly employable and just stick with their jobs, get other jobs, just are just very naturally acclimate to the workforce and enjoy working, which is the big battle, right? So I think rather than over a lot of regulations that I don't love, but this particular one might actually be a great opportunity for us if we can be the best at getting that data first and maybe being sure that we can report that data in a really robust way, because we may win on that data. And if we can be ahead of the curve there, that may be a really good thing.
Absolutely, I agree.
Any other comments or questions for Charlotte?
I have a question. What's the one thing that keeps you up at night?
Oh,
Just one. It's really hard, but what would be at the top of your list that should be at the top of ours?
well, on any given day, it will depend. I mean, right now, I think for me, from the risk perspective and the compliance perspective, it's something that's keeping a lot of people up, which is athletics. Where it's going, there are so many potential ripple effects of what currently is occurring and where we will end up. And I think that actually will impact a lot of the other risks that are on our top risk list as well. So that would probably be at the top.
Cheryl, thank you very much.
Thank you.
A lot of hard work in this space. Really appreciate it. So our last item will be presented by Associate Vice President for Advancement and WSU Alumni Association Executive Director Mariah Mackey.
Thanks so much, Regent Shetler. And I regret that I'm not there with all of you on the beautiful Vancouver campus. We've got a few alumni events here in Pullman today and tomorrow. I'm going to go over the Regents Distinguished Alumni Award, and the folks over there are going to help me in transferring the slides. So if you can go to the next one, please. The Regents Distinguished Alumni Award, it's the highest honor bestowed upon Washington State University alumni. Since the program's inception back in 1962, the award has been granted to U.S. ambassadors, doctors, educators, business leaders, scientists, journalists, athletes, artists, authors, and more. All of these individuals have made significant contributions to society, and through their accomplishments brought attention to the quality of a WSU education across the system. Interestingly enough, 66% of the recipients of this award have also previously received the Alumni Achievement Award, which is the Alumni Association's highest honor. I'm going to give you a couple of names. These guys are trying to keep up with me, but you're just fine. A couple of the names of folks, and you'll recognize them. The ones that are really recognizable for this award, Edward R. Murrow, author Sherman Alexie, Microsoft co-founder Paul Allen, cartoonist Gary Larson, astronaut John Fabian, sports broadcaster Keith Jackson, wheat researcher Orville Vogel. But a couple of the names from the last few years that have come out as recent recipients are Thomas Gradle, 2019 contributions to the understanding of atmospheric chemistry and work in developing the field of industrial ecology. Ronald Scherer, 2018 recipient, a Medal of Honor recipient for his valor during a mission in the Shock Valley of northeastern Afghanistan. And James Wells, in 2016, pioneering engineer of proteins, antibodies, and small molecules that target cell sites to thwart disease and enhance drug therapies. So overall, this is an extremely impactful award, again, for graduates of the WSU system. Our nomination process for this is on the Regents website. We require supplemental materials for all nominations, a letter of support, a nominee's resume or vita, and any additional documentation directly related to the candidate's accomplishments. Our staff works on getting all of those materials and enhancing the packets for each recipient or nominee, excuse me. The award committee itself evaluates the nominations and then sends their recommendations to the president, who subsequently makes a recommendation to the Regents for final approval. Each submitted nomination remains under consideration for up to 3 years. If the nominee is not selected, our team will again go back and work on enhancing that application packet so that it can be resubmitted once the 3 years have elapsed. Additional supporting documentation can be added at any time while the nomination is active. I'm going to go through the adjusted timeline. We had the honor of taking on this process starting this past summer. So we have a slightly shorter timeline for this year. So I'll show you this year's. September 15th started with a call for nominations. We've been working really closely with all past recipients as well to get the nominations out. And then we have a deadline of this week for nominations. We have received a number already. In December, the committee will begin reviewing nominations and makes a recommendation to the university president. In January, you will review nominations and select the recipient. In February, we do congratulatory phone calls and letters. We determine presentation details, working with the college that that graduate graduated from, and then determine any other presentation details. We look at now events that may be happening on campus already, where we have an audience that could be a part of the presentation, and look for appropriate events. And it could be on any of the campuses of the system. And again, we're working with engagement of previous award recipients, not only in that nomination process, but we also invite them back for the celebration and recognition of that recipient. Our standard timeline will start in May 15th with a call of for nominations, with a deadline July 15th, and then again go through that process. And our committee members, we expanded committee members this year to include the chair for the Faculty Senate, Tracy Klein, myself, an awards committee member for the Alumni Association Board of Directors. That's Rafael Cruneda from the WSU Tri-Cities campus, a past president of the WSU Alumni Association, appointed annually. Ed Little from the Vancouver area was selected this year. WSU Foundation Advocate Representative, appointed by the VP for Advancement. Mandy Minnick has stepped up this year in that role. Mike Connell is a standing member of this committee. And then we work with a student representative from one of the campuses, and we'll cycle through so that each year we'll have a different student rep. From ASWSU Global this year, it is Trish Tisdale. And then we have a committee secretary off of my staff. Any questions that I could answer around this amazing award? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mariah.
Thank you.
So this concludes the agenda items for the Strategic and Operational Excellence Committee, and I will now turn it back over to Chair Schauer.
Thank you. So we've earned ourselves a bit of a break. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the meeting over to Regent Ramos when we return to convene the Finance and Administration Committee at 3 o'clock. Thank you. Look at that. Thank you, thank you. President Schultz is ready. All right, hopefully you felt like that was a good break because we are going to use our minds and shift to our financial committee next. And no, I'm gonna use my brain in a totally different way. Yeah, which is gonna be hard math time. So I'm gonna pass it over to Regent Ramos to start.
Speaking of hard math.
Yeah, hard math, which is why, yeah, we're a good team. Here we go.
So much enthusiasm for
Yes,
Yes.
well, it's the afternoon. I want everyone to stay awake.
All right, well, thanks for reconvening. Welcome everyone to the Board of Regents Finance and Administration Committee meeting. Before we get started, I do want to extend my gratitude to Regent Cerna, Regent McDonald, and Regent Shetler for helping with the leadership team prepare for this committee session. So thanks to my colleagues. And also, just a little reminder, we have a little volume. We have 11 items to go through. And we only have till 5 p.m., but we do want to focus on quality and engagement. So please keep that in mind as we go through our conversation. And we are going to resequence the meeting at this moment and start with athletics because I think we have some pressing actions that we need to take, or at least Pat does. So we're going to start with athletics. So please allow me to introduce Executive Vice President for Finance and Administration, again, our CFO, Leslie Brunelli, and also our senior leader for athletics, John Harlow. Where's Matt? I always see John and Matt together. They didn't go up there together. So I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. Do you want Pat to start?
Yeah, happy to.
Pat, since you're starting, why don't you start us off and then we'll take it from there.
One, just appreciate everyone adjusting the agenda in around my schedule. There's a phone call I'm going to try to take at the bottom of this hour, but I'll just, I guess, John, I'll just pass it to you right now because you'll jump into the meat of this.
That works. We'll take it.
Yeah.
Thanks, Pat. I heard you all mention PACE as I was listening into an earlier committee discussion and corporate PACE versus higher ed and what have you. And my very narrow, very biased opinion, there's nothing quite like the pace of college athletics, particularly in the environment we find ourselves in now. So with that in mind, thank you for the opportunity to provide a brief update on our FY24 budget projections. We're still very early in the reporting period. We've now wrapped up month 4. There's still a lot of opportunity for things to shift. But as we find ourselves today, we are currently projected, as I suspect you've seen in your board packet, to have a $400,000 shortfall to budget, as we had stated back in September. And I'll get through what's led us to that, starting with the revenues. Our first item there, and really the biggest ticket that's driving the shortfall as we see it today is revolved around ticket sales. If you rewind to September when we met last, at that point in time, we were on an astronomical pace with ticket sales. We had sold out Wisconsin, we had sold out Oregon State. We were on pace to sell out Arizona at that time, as well as Colorado, leaving only Northern Colorado and Stanford, which was family weekend that had been historically a well-performing game as well. We hit the bye week and ticket sales really stalled. And we have not really seen the movement that we had projected since then. So with that, there's still obviously one home game left tomorrow night against Colorado, and our path to a bowl game has gotten a little bit more difficult since our last update as well. So those are really the driving factors into our updated projection of the $600,000 shortfall there, but still time to recoup some of those costs or those shortfalls as we move into basketball seasons and the Olympic sports in the spring. One item I'll point to with a positive surplus thus far is related to contributions, and particularly what's driving this is what I'll call our operational contributions, our endowment distribution and the foundation support that we receive. Both of those, we've received our first few distributions from both of those entities, and they've come in higher than budget. So those are helping us track better, and we'll continue to see those. The one item I'll draw, the biggest portion of our contributions is our annual fund. And in conversations with our CAF, They have seen an uptick compared to where we were at this time last year. However, the lion's share of our fundraising activity comes in the spring semester, tied with football season ticket renewals, and there's just some uncertainty related to that next year. And so it's really tough to put a projection on that, but still good to see the pace as to where we are right now. Next line item is our NCAA and Pac-12 update. You'll notice I've left that flat in your schedules. I may get through the rest of these and then turn it over to you to give a bit of an update there as well. Last item I'll call out on the revenue side is our royalties. We've had one distribution from our royalty license partner through quarter number one, which has historically been our slowest performing quarter, and we saw some positivity there as well. Those distributions are only reflected through June 30th. You'll remember August 4th is kind of the fateful day that some of the stuff started to transpire. We saw a real surge of Coug faithfuls and buying other things at that time, and so we're hopeful that will matriculate to the royalty fees as well. So right now we're showing positivity there. You notice the rest of the revenue categories there are shown flat at this time. However, there are a lot of gives and takes between those that are offsetting each other. So as we move into closing out football season in the fall, we'll reconvene in January for an update, and we'll hope to have a much more broader update at that time as well. Leslie, you want to talk about Pac-12?
Sure. So everything that John has told you is really predicated on the largest revenue source being the media rights coming in through the Pac-12 remaining intact as we think it should be, or at least based on the budget that was approved by the Pac-12 for this fiscal year. The challenge is that with the uncertainty that's going on, we have approved a scope of services agreement to continue the operation of the conference that does change some of the expenditures they will have. We also, all 12 schools approved a retention agreement to keep the staff in place to ensure that the revenue will be there for this current fiscal year. That will remain to be seen over the course of these next several months. We have asked for robust reporting from the Pac-12 on budget to actual, and we have not yet received that information. We're not sure that they can produce that type of information. The other challenge, of course, is making sure that the conference secures revenue for all of the sports that are upcoming, all of the sponsorships for the championships. So everything that is in our information for revenues really is predicated on them coming in at or around budget. So I just want to put that out there. We don't know it's changed yet, but you need to be aware that that is still some uncertainty.
And we'll certainly provide more updates on those in future meetings as we have more information. I'll flip to the expenses side. You'll see in your packet showing all of those flat, but we'll touch on a few lines. Compensation, and I'll get very, very nerdy and budget manager minded here for a second. We are 8/24 through the reporting period as far as our pay cycle goes. We're showing that flat. However, we had a few items running somewhat hot through the first couple of weeks of the reporting. Particularly in student hours, hourly workers, and overtime. However, we've met with those units. We've reorganized some of those units as well, and feel confident we can get compensation back to a place where we meet budget at the end of the year. Scholarships, we've mentioned in a couple of previous meetings how COVID had impacted roster sizes, allowing for more student athletes to receive aid. We have finally, as we had predicted, seen those matriculate through the system. We've seen roster sizes reset. To date, we are $300,000 better to budget, or as far as the pace, than we were at this time last year. However, there's still a few things moving through. I'm not quite ready yet to call a positive variance on there, but I believe that we will land better than budgeted. Last item I'll call attention to is our sports programs. As a reminder, this is team travel, it's recruiting, game expenses, medical expenses, and student athlete meals. I'll call attention to it because last year, that was one of the items that we ran over fairly significantly. So it's obviously something that we are watching with a laser focus. We are now starting to see, obviously we're wrapping up the fall, invoices, settlements and whatnot starting to hit the system at this particular time. There's nothing that we can see that would allude to we're running over any of those areas. Anybody that knows me well knows I'll never say that I'm comfortable with where we are. I'm definitely uncomfortable, but I'm as comfortable as I can be at this particular point in time. And I will say to Pat's credit, just to reiterate to the group, everyone in athletics, coaches, units, department heads is aware of the budget. Pat brings it up in every discussion, keeps it as a priority in the frontal lobe of everyone in the department. And I truly believe that our coaches and department heads, top to bottom, believe it and are doing their best to keep to that. And historically, I may express a little bit of bias here, no one has done it better than WSU has as well. You look at an expense per win at the Power 5 level, WSU has done it better than those that we're going against week in and week out. The other thing related to the uncertainty and just the tangible costs, I can't put a dollar value on now, but we're fighting hard to recruit new student athletes with the uncertainty of next year, but also retain our current student athletes with the uncertainty of next year. And with that, every student athlete or every potential recruit that says no, you've got to chase another yes. Every student athlete that is on our current roster that leaves, we've got to go chase another student athlete. And there are real tangible costs with that as well. So I don't have a dollar value to place on that yet, but just to make the Regents aware of, there are, we either have to go visit another student athlete or bring another here for every no that we have. And we have heard some no's. And so we are doing the best to keep our rosters as competitive and full as we possibly can with that. So we'll continue to monitor labor and sports programs, top to bottom, and with a laser focus. And we hope to provide a better update, more thorough update than in January. But in summary, as of now, looking at a $400,000 shortfall of budget.
Do we track the average cost of a recruit, and then tracking now with the portal, if, you know, the duration in which the money we perhaps have spent to recruit the student athlete and the timeline in which some choose to stay versus those that depart? Do we have a sense of being prepared to track that or watch that in the coming years? Or
it's not a metric that we have tracked historically. It's so dynamic in where you're bringing that student athlete from or where you're going to meet them, who they're bringing with them, and maybe some other intangibles that may be a part of their visit. It's not something that we've tracked. It's certainly something that could be explored.
And that changed, is that not correct? That you can bring multiple people with you versus in the past you could only bring one, or now?
Correct. You could bring one chaperone. That amount has expanded. The amount of visits has expanded. The duration of weekly open recruiting period has expanded as well, and continues to change.
Recruiting will continue to be deregulated as the NCAA looks at these through an antitrust lens.
Any other questions on the athletic budget? I just want to thank our athletic director. Did somebody start to say something? Okay, Pat, Sean, and the team, and John. There's a committee that also meets to oversee the progress to plan, and Dr. Skilton is part of that. So there's a lot of eyes on the system, and the team responds with transparency and with granularity. And when we go through the 40 different revenue streams that feed the SITs into these status reports. And so if you ever have any question, go to John.
That was still pretty good.
All right. Cool. Anything else? I'll go to the second information item. Thank you, John. All right, so our next item is with Chief Audit Executive Heather Lopez, who will present our internal audit update.
Yeah. I don't have a PowerPoint, so, okay. All right. Good afternoon. This is semi-annual report for our office, and there's 4 items in your package. I had the end of year report, 2 audit reports that I'll talk to from an external auditor, and then our plan. I'll just highlight some of the key points that I want to make. First, on the end of year, did it really high level, just giving you a snapshot of where our effort was and activities that we were engaged in. A couple of things to point out on the liaison efforts. I've talked about this in a couple of updates before. Over the last 3 years, that has really been a greater investment of time from our office. You can see in the graph, it was about 17% of our effort on liaison activities that pulls away from doing assurance audits.
and other activities. 3 years ago, it was about 3, maybe 5% of our time. And that was pretty high from any past period. So there's, of course, less staff and more audits, which makes that percentage a lot higher. But when budgeting for liaison activities, I can usually get information from the state auditor on what they're going to look at and how much they're going to be engaged at our entity. And 90% of our audits or our liaison activities are really the state auditor's office. So that's a big one to keep a pulse on. And they're not here as much this year. So I budgeted last year to make sure that we had enough time to cover it. And we pretty much met the effort that I expected for working with the external auditor. This year, fully anticipate that there won't be as much need because we won't have as many of those external audits with the state auditor. We still have other audits that we work on and other entities, and the state auditor will be back at the end of the year. They're here right now doing performance audit, and they'll be back in the springtime to do a 2-year accountability audit. Also in the investigation activity, the total number of investigations is not very high compared to some past years. There have been very complex investigations that have taken up some time, but no really prevalent themes, just more complex. Misuse, conflict of interest are typical of what we look at. The ethics policy, I did have a question about that, how much that has come into play on some of the investigations. As you're aware, we've always had an ethics policy. We've had a couple of them. December 2022, they were combined into an executive policy, which made it more clear what the expectations were. And it also made for ethics training as a requirement. All of the complaints that we investigated in the last year were related to activities that were before that policy was published. So up to date, I actually don't have any new complaints that are of activity after that policy is published and after the requirement for the ethics training. How much they're related, the correlation between this updated policy and the ethics training and less investigations or no investigations in that area, I can't tell you yet. But we're tracking it through our continuous audit tests. We look at the required trainings. There's other areas that there's required trainings, how well we're performing in those areas and what the requirements are. So anticipate by the end of the year, we'll be able to take a look back and see how well we're doing on meeting those requirements, and then just keeping a pulse on the types of issues that come in and see if there's some areas maybe in the policy that's been out there now for a while, and those training requirements, see if they need to be beefed up and better information out there. Then to the 2 state auditors office reports. So state auditor's office does require that the governing board is made aware of the results of audits, and they actually want to present to the governing board the results of the audits, or they will allow for the exit document to be presented as it is in this packet, as long as somebody from one of the regents is at the meeting with the auditor. And Regent Shower was at the last meeting, went in detail over what the issues were and what they looked at. There's just really housekeeping items from the last 2-year audit. They did not have that type of exit engagement on the single audit. That one, they look at the single audit as an audit of the state, and WSU is just one fish in the pond, basically. So they don't have that requirement to come to the governing board. On the accountability audit, just as I noticed, just some house cleaning items. Most of these we roll up into our audit plan and we take a look at it, and we do follow up on those areas, not just specific to those units that were called out, but also looking at system-wide, is this something happening somewhere else? And pretty much leveraging what the external auditor is doing and kind of jumping off from that with the number of auditors that I have, instead of opening a whole new audit in those areas. The single audit I did want to talk about just a little bit. I've talked about that before. That's the statewide single audit of federal programs. We have a spend of over $750,000 as a state, obviously as the university, but the state as a whole. On the single audit, we had a finding three years ago, and then we had a repeat finding the next year. And this last year, they determined that our findings from the prior years were fully resolved, which was great. But we had a finding in a new area. It's a little disheartening to see the finding, and when you look at the detail of it, there was a program, it's in financial aid, and return to title IV funds is the student is awarded funds, and if they don't, they're up funded the money, and then if they don't stay the whole semester, then they have to pay back. And it's kind of prorated. We did not pay back as an institution all of the funds to the tune of $2,500. And that made it to the level of a finding. This is out of $203 million in federal awards. There was an error of $2,500. So there's a requirement from the federal government that if there is a finding or a question cost over $25,000, that it gets reported as a finding. 2,500 didn't meet that. But again, we are audited as a state. So we are one entity with all the other state institutions. They look at the financial aid program, the return to Title IV funds across all of the institutions, collectively, all of them, if they went over the 25,000. Also, they used a technique that I hear about when I'm auditing folks. It's like, please don't do that, extrapolation. So they had a pool, a population, they found some errors in that population, and they extrapolated that error rate to the whole population. And they determined that that extrapolation would mean not $2,500 error, but $39,000 error if it happened across that whole population. So the finding corrective action has already been taken. It was taken by the time the finding was written and confirmed. So when they do come back, the next single audit, we'll be able to be in good shape as an institution. And then the last is on the audit plan. Pretty much the same as each year, do a risk assessment. The level of detail, the number of surveys changes depending on what's going on across the institution. I am also looking forward to the maturation of the enterprise risk management model so that we can piggyback off of that a whole lot more. We did use the input into those surveys and that the risk matrix quite a bit to identify and kind of supplement with the risks that we were seeing. In the end, what goes into the audit plan is after the conversations with folks looking at what activity is already engaged, where are some areas that audit can take a look at and provide some value by evaluating the controls. There is a focus this year on a lot of our planned areas on evaluating more at the micro level and appropriate use of resources, making sure of compliance, obviously. There's probably one area that is not specifically in the audit plan, but the chief compliance officer had mentioned it, looking at the top 20. One area of all of those that is not a compliance, and that's employee morale. It's very difficult to audit that. We don't have that as an audit area, but when we go out to our units and we're doing our testing, we are doing more in-field and walking through with folks and internal audit out there and just talking with units, talking with management. It tends to kind of help and understand where people have a role in the system and where they can add value. So we're hoping that that will help a little bit in that area as well. And with that, I will take any questions.
Questions? I just like to make a comment. I have really appreciated in the time that we worked together, the openness, the transparency that you bring to the audit function and having that direct access with the auditor. And it's really well done. So appreciate all of your efforts to pay attention to this area and help us pay attention to this area. So thank you, Heather.
Yeah, just to add to that, Heather and I had a meeting and, you know, this whole idea that the tone starts at the top and the culture of compliance and integrity of our system. And as they go through the mechanism of testing, it's also an opportunity to teach and reinforce our messages. around that culture. So appreciate that. Thank you.
It's kind of nice to see those resolved ticks there.
Right.
It's been a few years, so it's good.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Our last information item is the fiscal year 2023 financial statement audit update, and we're inviting to the podium our Assistant Vice President, Associate Vice President for Finance and Administration, and our Deputy CFO, Matt Skinner.
He's our Senior Associate Vice President as well.
There you
I will like to start this, we're moving from internal audit to our external audit. I do want to call out how much work Matt and his team in the controller's office have done to get us on track to be able to deliver the audit in January of next year. That will move it up pretty significantly from the prior 2 years coming into the Workday implementation. It is not a small lift, but we are well on track to make that happen. And kudos to you for making that happen.
Thank you. Thank you. Good to be here this afternoon. And if I could just add, thanks to many people across all the business and financial services. It takes many departments, many people to get the audit done. And to move it up 4 months, we're really grateful for the progress we've made. So it's many people making that happen. Wanted to also let the board know just an update on our financial statement audit process. As you recall, Eide Bailey is the independent accounting firm that performs our audit. We engaged them through a competitive process, starting with fiscal year 21. So fiscal year 23 is their third year already of performing our audits. We're working with them right now to extend their contract out for the additional optional 2 years. So that would make 5 years total with Eide Bailey as our independent accounting firm. And that's our recommendation as we proceed with those 5 additional 2 years. And we'll see where we're at in 5 years. There's not specific guidance for higher education on how often you should rotate your accounting firm, but certainly guidance on how they need to rotate their lead audit partner on the audit. So we'll go 2 more years with Eide Bailey and see where that takes us. Any questions on that update? Okay.
Well, maybe just a comment. I did meet with Eide Bailey, and they were complimentary on the progress of Workday. And specifically to your ownership to be much more proactive, to install a much more robust training system and reminder system on how to use Workday. So it's been a long haul on that one. So appreciate your work.
Matt's also created a really detailed project management to get the audit completed this year. It looks not dissimilar from how we would construct a facility. It's that type of level of detail in a Gantt chart.
Okay, we're shifting to future action items. Are we? Oh, yeah, we are. Okay, our first future action item is on the proposed academic 2024-2025 tuition rates, to which we got the great context earlier. But this is really the decision-making material for our tuition decision.
And with that context, I will go quickly through this to keep us on schedule as well. You are obviously aware of the authority of the Board of Regents to set tuition. We are governed by the cap for our undergraduate tuition increase for the resident students. That cap moved from the spring of the year to October 1. We already have that information. It is 3%. We knew it would be 3% because the calculation is still based on the spring numbers. I showed you this in the previous discussion just to show the years that WSU chose to be below the cap. Again, just for information, if we add that up and continue that out since we made that decision in 18-19, that is $110 to the student, the differential here. That would be $2 million in revenue to the institution, provided that enrollment was as it is now. We've already talked about HEPI. I'm not going to spend time there. So let's go straight to the request. If you've seen this back in September, we are requesting a 3% increase for all of our undergraduate and graduate rates. You can see the changes for each of those. I'll call out particularly the resident undergraduate. That is a $329 change per year, not semester, per year. We solicit from our campus community, from our professional and other programs that are outside of those standard rates, if they would like to make their increase and their justification for why. You know that PharmD has had some changes in the last several years. They are requesting a 3.4% increase for the PharmD resident student. They are not requesting an increase for the non-resident student. And our self-sustaining rate, the applied economics program, is requesting what is a 2.6% change. This is a per credit hour program, not an annual or a semester program. That's a $17 per credit hour charge. What you will notice from the meeting that we had back in September, we had the School of Medicine on this slide and we have removed them from it right for now. We're going to bring back a different discussion for tuition for the School of Medicine in January and have a future action in January and an action in March. We're doing some additional work with Chancellor DeWald and Dean Record to look at where our student tuition is for the med school in comparison to other institutions. They do have some funding needs there, and we need to look at that a little bit more holistically. So we'll bring that back to you in January. We've already talked about that. Our next step, of course, is the action item in January. Again, we'll talk about the School of Medicine in January and in March, but there are some other fees that are upcoming, and these have gotten separated this year because we are able to accelerate tuition. The one nice thing about doing the tuition earlier, it gives our students a little bit of forethought on how that will impact them, but it also allows Psyche to be able to package aid one time. So you can package it now and be ready for the spring term. The housing and dining rates will come forward as a future action in January and then a final action in March. The student SNA and technology fees, future action in January and final in March. Actually, that's supposed to be final in May. And I need to change that. It's now April, not May. I need to fix my slide. Right. Okay. That's it. Any other questions?
Yeah, Leslie,
Yes, ma'am.
you know, we've moved forward the tuition piece. Will we be ultimately moving forward the housing and dining so that Psyche can put the whole package together?
We would like to. We're not well coordinated with our student affairs folks this year. They also do a lot of discussion with the student populations to do that. It'd be nice if they all carried forward together, and I think that's the goal, but this year it simply didn't work out. Do you want to add anything to housing and dining specifically? The SNA is a lot more detailed because the SNA is sort of in the spring because it aligns with the student referendum process, and we want to give them, of course, the time to do that process. We have, since we spoke with you in September, met with the Student Governments Council. That's the representatives from all of the campuses, both undergrad and grad. They have asked for your name. I hope they've reached out to you already because they did want to have a follow-up conversation with you, but we expect their input on the tuition rate by the end of the calendar year to package it for January. But do you want to talk to housing and dining?
Yeah, the only thing I would add is that by moving stuff, we've moved it ahead. Sorry. Thank you. So we've moved it up so it's 2 meetings ahead of where it has historically been. And really, in some ways, that's a bit of a compromise. It means that, as Leslie was saying, it does mean that our housing and dining folks can engage really heavily with the student housing advisory board, which is made up largely of students. It gives us all that fall semester to really engage with them, lay out all the budget numbers for them, let them kind of see what the picture looks like. And we really, they are integral in deciding what are the adjustments to any of those rates going to be. It does though still, and we checked with Psyche and team, it does still allow financial aid to do packaging earlier than they have been able to do historically. Tuition and fees and housing and dining are the 2 biggest ticket items. The SNA fee, as Leslie was saying, is a little more complicated because of tremendous student engagement around those. And what our financial aid folks said is those are such a small percentage of the total package that they can make those minor adjustments much more easily if SNA stays on a somewhat more traditional timeline.
Just in regards to the fees and some of that information we saw, I mean, the fees felt like they're very much a differentiator of separate the kind of the accelerator of what our total package looks like. And I appreciate that students are very engaged in the conversation. And, you know, why not slap on another fee if mom and dad are paying the bill? I worry a little bit that that we're creating a fee structure, when we look at it the way you broke it out today, it's pretty significant. And it is real money, and it does impact how we market ourselves clearly and how competitive we may or may not be. And so I just do you anticipate it going up quite a bit? I mean, what's on the docket for the wish list or the things that they're hoping to have?
Yeah, I'll talk about the ones that I know about. And again, this is, I'm going to focus on the fees that I'm aware of where they're at. The S&A fees, I actually don't know where they're at. They're so early in their process. I don't think we can predict what they're going to be proposing or requesting. I will say that with the Cub, this is Pullman specific, with the Cub and the Student Rec Center and the Chinook, there is a lot of distress among those student boards at the reduction of services that we have had to implement because of the financial situation in those spaces. The SRC in particular has faced tremendous financial hardship and had to make significant cuts to services and hours this year. And there's two places that happens that affects students. One is it affects students in terms of their access to the facilities, the recreational facilities. It also, one of the ways that those budget cuts get implemented is reduction of staffing, because if we're reducing hours, we're reducing staffing hours, and many of those staffing hours are student hours. So it also reduces employment, on-campus employment opportunities for students. So I don't know what the numbers will be. It is too early to say, but I do predict that there will be requests for increases in the SRC fee and the Chinook fee and the Cub fee. And those boards they're just really concerned about the reduction in services and availability and access to those facilities that students are experiencing. It's a tough situation. Yeah, I don't know what the percentage will be. I mean, I think there'll be moderate increases, but they will be increases. Yeah. Anything else before I go?
I have a question. I actually don't know if either of the two of you can answer this, but I'm curious about the packaging of how we're communicating in those early enrollment conversations, the continual increase in tuition. So I saw 2 million, that's a big number. And yet I understand the impact on the student, even if it's small. And so what I have advocated for is just that open transparency when we're recruiting students, that you will experience a tuition increase every year. It's unlikely that you won't. And so I'm curious if, one, we are doing that, and two, if that is impacting our enrollment. And of course, I should have asked this a little earlier around affordability. So maybe I'll just follow up later. But
And I'm not sure that we still have Saichi. He's gone. Okay. We need to talk about the right one.
If there are no further questions, that is a future action item that we'll take in January. Our next future action item is with regards to the WSU Foundation investment policy and proposed amendments. So we are welcoming our Vice President for Advancement and CEO Mike Connell to join us.
It's private.
Sure.
Well, hello.
Hello. Nice to see everybody.
Mike will take the lead on this, but I just wanted to point out there is a red line version of the document in the portal. It's a very lengthy document, but it is the underlying investment policy statement for the Washington State University Foundation. Largely, it is housekeeping, but Mike will point out the specific changes that are in there.
Thank you, Leslie, and good afternoon, everybody. Just a handful of, again, I think housekeeping type of proposed changes. I think, again, you have this in your material, but just to quickly review, one change is at one point we'd added planned gift assets to the responsibility of the investment committee, and now we're taking them back out. The folks on the investment committee asked to be relieved of that responsibility. Our planned gift assets are those that are funded with life income instruments, a charitable gift annuity, a charitable remainder trust. The endowment has a perpetual horizon and one payout spending rate. These instruments have a variety of horizons based on the duration of the instrument. They have a variety of payouts rates that are calculated in a variety of different ways. And so we will move that responsibility to the foundation's executive committee. The second one is just, again, that was a cleanup thing. That foundation is the principal entity for promoting, receiving, and managing private gifts in support of the institution. Thirdly, the appointment of committee members will be done jointly by the chair of our board of the WSU Foundation, as well as the chair of the WSU Foundation Investment Committee. Number four, to require the chair of the investment committee or their designee to report at least annually to the foundation's board of directors and this body, the Board of Regents. Number five, updating the appropriate Washington nonprofit laws. So that is now the Nonprofit Corporation Act, RCW 24.03A. Next, allow a waiver of the 1.5% management and advancement fee at the joint discretion of the university president, as well as the foundation CEO. And lastly, to update the appendices, both A and B, relative to asset class allocations and benchmarks. So the investment committee reviewed these changes in May and approved them. The WSU Foundation Board reviewed these changes and approved them in October. Happy to take any questions at all.
Questions? Cool.
Thank you.
That was efficient. Okay, so our next item is a future action item that we're also going to seek accelerating into an action item. So the topic is delegation of authority to approve residency agreements. And our CFO, as well as President Schultz and Executive Vice President for Health Sciences and WSU Spokane Chancellor Daryl DeWald is joining us.
Thank you. So I will start and then hand it over to Daryl to do just a little bit of education around what the medical education and the residency component is. Special thanks to Danielle Hess, who drafted and redrafted this many times for us, and Amanda Owen in our procurement and contracts area, who called this out to our attention. Residency agreements are complex, and I think as you listen to Daryl, you'll find how complex they are. They are actually a accumulation of 4 different agreements. The first of those is our master affiliation agreement. That's underlying 3 different agreements. One of them is a financial services agreement. The master affiliation agreements for each of our residency undertakings right now has a 5-year life. The financial services agreement, however, only has a single year, but it's renewed over this 5-year period. So we had a lot of consternation about, do we actually have the authority to sign this or not? Is it a single year because of the financial services agreement, or is it a 5-year and it's the life of the agreement? Of course, and the dollar amount far exceeds both Kirk and my authority. We have made a decision that we're just going to bring these to you anyway. They are very complex and complicated agreements. There are currently 2 in place, one in Everett and one in Pullman for family medicine. The Everett is the internal medicine. But now we have the new one that you are aware of that became a reality in the spring for pediatrics in Spokane. That is still unsigned, and we now have some urgency to get that signed. Now I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Leslie. And again, thanks to Danielle. And thanks for an opportunity to maybe give you a little bit of history and some of the why, based on the need that we have in the state, how our College of Medicine is committed to this, and then I'll follow up a little bit with the finances. So I want to remind you that we have an 8-year-old College of Medicine. So the Elson Floyd College of Medicine is 8 years old, 7 entering classes, 3 graduating classes. So for context, if you think our physician graduates, 3 classes of those, the first physician graduates will move and complete either their medical residencies, which are usually 3 years, or they will move into fellowship programs this summer. So we will have Coug docs out there practicing independently, reminding you that when they finish medical school, they cannot practice. They have to go through a process in that additional training. We refer to that training as graduate medical education. It has 2 pieces: residency programs that are typically 3 years. Fellowship programs are stacked on top of that, and they usually are for specialty or subspecialty training. So the 3-year residency programs can be entered into at this point by allopathic and osteopathic physicians, so MDs or DOs. And they go through quite an elaborate process to do so. We have chosen, because of the need in the state, to develop a residency program. I want to call out with the support of the state, the support of leadership, our medical school is well above the expected timeline to develop these residency programs. So the need is like this. In the state of Washington, a couple years ago, we had 175 GME programs that are residencies and fellowships. 13 of them were on the east side of the Cascades. So with that for a second, and what that means is the west side of the state, there's between a 3 and 4 fold per capita number of medical residents, meaning that we have health profession shortage areas on the east side of the state and in certain places. Also, by federal designation of our 39 counties, every county has health profession shortage areas. And I believe it's 16 or 17 of those counties, the entire county is considered a health profession shortage area. So we have a dire need for primary care and specialty care. So you can see that we should be committing to that, because we know that between 50 and 70% of the residents that complete their training will practice within 100 miles of the site of their residency. So that keeps them there. It's part of the glue. Especially family medicine is seen, they will stay in the same place. I can provide statistics, but rural and underserved communities especially have a lower representation of residency sites. So
Who within the state or at the federal level manages the GME slots we get at the state of Washington or
Yeah.
within the state of Washington?
So that's a huge question, Regent Dickinson, in terms of the way that residencies are established and then the way that they are funded. But I think what you're referring to is how the reimbursement model. So if you'll give me just a second, let me walk through kind of a little bit of the high level financials on that, so you have a sense of why we're asking for the delegated authority. But you have to establish residency programs, and then the federal designation of cap slots will often come following the establishment of a residency program. But it does speak into how those programs are developed and sustained. So our College of Medicine has shown great commitment to the building of these residency programs. And they've done so with a Everett internal medicine residency program. And it's what we call a 12-12-12 program. They had a little larger entering class the first year, but that means that they are educating 36 internal medicine residents in partnership with a clinical partner. But WSU College of Medicine is the sponsoring entity, and WSU is the sponsoring institution, meaning they accept the responsibility for the management of finances and the personnel, the faculty, even the pay of the residents. The second is a Pullman family medicine residency. It's what we call a 333. And that was established, as you know, just recently. And we have the first entering class of residents are well into their training. The next is the Spokane Pediatrics Residency. We have accredited that program. So it's already been accredited, and it will be hopefully a 666. And when you look at this, the sponsoring institution, WSU, and our College of Medicine in all three cases. Why? Because we need to have a clinical partner. They help deliver the clinical delivery, and they will help in terms with the faculty. So the partner in Everett is Providence Health and Services, and the partner in Spokane is Providence Health and Services, and in Pullman is Pullman Regional Hospital. So financially, maybe it gives you a handhold to think about that. Broad strokes, it's going to cost $200,000 to $250,000 per year per resident to educate them in our current system. That is a significant investment. That investment goes to hiring the personnel that are responsible for the programs, the faculty, and paying their salaries. So this tells us about the responsibility of a sponsoring institution. So let me, at this point, kind of give you an idea. What is a sponsoring institution? Directly from ACGME, the accrediting body. So the residency and fellowship programs accredited by the Accreditation Council for Graduate Medical Education, or ACGME, must function under the ultimate authority and oversight of one sponsoring institution. Oversight of resident fellow assignments and of the quality of the learning and the working environments by the sponsoring institution extends to all participating sites. The sponsor must maintain its ACGME accreditation. They must identify a designated institutional official, or DIO, and that DIO must have the authority and responsibility for the oversight and administration of each of the sponsoring institutions' ACGME accredited programs, as well as for ensuring compliance with ACGME institutional, common, and specialty, subspecialty specific program requirements. The DIO does not necessarily need to be an employee of the sponsor. This final one is pretty sobering, but the sponsoring institutions' commitment to GME by providing the necessary financial support for administration, education, and clinical resources, including personnel. Dr. James Record was hired initially to be the dean of GME and CME. So he has vast experience in this area. He's now moved into the overall dean role. But the GME approvals have to come to the governing body of an institution. And that's why we're bringing this forward to you at this time. I want to stop for a moment because I just talked about costs, but if there are any questions about anything that Leslie and I have said. Yeah, Jude.
So the residents are treating patients. Is there revenue?
So
Or was that the net cost?
thank you for providing an opportunity. So, yes, thank you, Judy. So the offsets to the costs can come from philanthropic sources, outside sources, or reimbursement for clinical services that are provided. We have chosen a little different route for supporting our GME programs. And in fact, this has created some positive interest from the state and the federal government, because we have sought philanthropic support to do the startup for those programs. But yes, if you look at the different programs, that's why there's a differential in the costs, and sometimes even a differential in the costs on a year-to-year basis, is because of the clinical services and the reimbursement, CMS reimbursements that come for the patient service. Yep.
So this was our challenge, Regent McDonald, is we could not decide, are we asking you to approve the big cost number or the net cost number after we took into account the revenue? We finally decided we're going to ask for the big cost number overall.
But it's total cost as opposed to net cost.
Yes,
Thank you.
yes,
That was a clarification.
Daryl, I'm still confused on the federal side of the GME slots that were given. Like, is there not an awarding or a process in which you are given X number of slots for residency at
Yes,
the
so
federal level? And is there dollars that come with that?
yeah, the federal cap slots that are earned or awarded, those are the factor for the reimbursement, the patient services reimbursement. So when you establish a new program, you want to build it to scale so that you get cap slot designation so that you'll get the reimbursement. This is part of what makes it very challenging, but also really good, is to work with a clinical partner. And that's why we're working with mature health systems that understand the landscape of how hopefully to maximize the cap slots. I would also mention to you that there are other discussions and processes underway to develop additional residency programs because of the compelling need to keep physicians in the state of Washington.
So our request to you today is to provide us with the authority for the particular contract that we have in front of us right now, which is the Spokane Pediatrics. And we initially, when we met with Regent Ramos in our pre-meeting, we discussed having an unlimited authority. She asked, well, look at your face, and that was exactly hers. Sorry. So perhaps we've reduced that, and we've asked for authority to delegate up to 15 million, because we do believe that the pediatrics residency has a 5-year cost of $10 million, just over $10 million. But what we would like to commit to you is after this one is resolved, because of its urgency, is that as new residencies are developed, we bring forward to you the master affiliation agreement. So you see the full 5-year plan with all of its 4 parts. And we then approve the financial services agreement. You delegate authority to resolve any of the agreements underneath that, but you see it as at the overall level.
And trying to help you with that face also, a reminder.
This is a smile.
A reminder, Regent Showers, that working across several domains, but the foundation has been huge for us, and our College of Medicine has raised over $8 million for that program alone. The same has happened for the Pullman Regional Hospital Family Medicine residency. We're very deliberate and active about raising funds to support those, so we won't just leave you hanging. So we will be seeing patient clinical services reimbursement for some programs, but we will continue that process to raise money.
We brought in a significant donor who had never been a donor at WSU before with pediatrics to bring in Fritz Wolf. Is a big coup there, so congratulations. He usually only gives to Gonzaga. All right.
You want to introduce Jennifer?
Yes, so Dr. Jennifer Robinson, would you please stand for a moment? So Dr. Robinson, who is a pharmacist and who is a deeply experienced academic leader, she served as an associate dean in our College of Pharmacy and Pharmaceutical Sciences, agreed to kind of be the partner pair. Craig Parks is an associate vice president, but Jennifer has stepped into this space serving as an associate vice president, and part or a large part of her mission is the interprofessional education development across our health sciences teams. But I'm very appreciative of Jennifer joining the leadership team, and she brings a lot. So thank you, Kurt, for embarrassing her. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you, Kurt. All right, I hope that brought clarity to the urgency of the matter and the timing, which is why we're going to accelerate the future action item to an action item tomorrow. And the request specifically states that limit. So thank you for amending that.
Yes.
But if there are no further discussions or objections to that, we'll move forward.
It's like resting Regent face.
Yeah, it was really more, I just thought the good public process, you would want to bring it, not necessarily that I would want to prohibit you from authority to do the work.
Unlimited does have that effect on
It
most
does have a
people.
little bit of an
I
impact.
get it.
All right, cool. We are on good pace here. We have 5 items for action items to consider. Recall that we have reviewed these subjects earlier in September. And so we're going to go ahead and get started with the first and second action items that, our CFO, Leslie, super person up front, is going to continue to stay there at the podium. But we're going to invite, I think I saw Olivia on the screen there. So welcome to you and your team again to talk about our capital projects.
Thank you. The first 2 items, we can handle those together. It's the project budget approval and the design approval for the Champions facility for our athletics department. Think of this as the Student Success Center for our student athletes that will be located in the PED. You heard a presentation at the September meeting from our architect who came to Pullman to talk about that facility. Olivia, can you talk us through these 2?
Yes, so as Leslie said, this is really the Student Success Center, takes care of the academic and general well-being of our student athletes. It is a renovation of racquetball courts in the Physical Education Building, PEB. So from that point of view alone, it's kind of a win because it utilizes racquetball courts are not fully utilized, as well as the siting is very good because it is right where the student athletes go from their residence halls, passing bowler, passing the athletic facilities on their way to class. So it's just a very convenient location for them. The project budget that we're asking for is based on pledges, 9.4 million. We have a design builder under contract for design. Their contract creates a project budget of 8.3 because we are not borrowing, and so we're committing to do work based on the cash that's going to be available. And so if you look at the cash flow chart, you'll see that when we start construction in January and finish in December of next year, that we would have the cash to make those commitments whole. And the remaining money, 1.5 million, 1.4 million, coming later would be, we would come back to, well, guess we would come back to you and let you know what we're doing with that in terms of the expansion of the rest of physical education building for the program. The design was presented to you all in September. Walker Construction is the contractor. NAC out of Spokane, or Walker and NAC are both out of Spokane, gave you the design presentation. And the presentation, I believe, is also attached in your write-up. And so that covers the 2 action items for champions, and I'm happy to take questions.
We also have Jason Bearlocker here, who of course is your tour guide in the health sciences facility, as the project manager, can answer questions as well.
So Olivia, I know we're in discussions with another potential donor to this project that could significantly, enhance what we're able to do. How easy is it to do a phase 2, or if more cash becomes available, say in the next 30 days? I'm just curious.
30.
Well, now she's excited.
30. Wow. Well, okay.
Come on, Olivia.
I think we can do something. Of course, the camera isn't pointing at Jason, so I'm not sure he's smiling, wincing, or twitching. I think what happened? Stand by. I think that if we do get that kind of a cash, and I hate to be such a nag about it, but it has to be cash.
Yes.
Oh my God.
Trust me, Olivia, I understand. I like cash too.
Okay, sorry. Don't mean to be disrespectful. So yes, we can certainly do something with that. We've talked during this design period of the improvements that we could do anyway. And we've scaled back, obviously, because we didn't have the money to make the commitments. But I think there's a lot of ideas about how to expand and further bring the whole program together. And if Jason wants to chime in and add to that, Jason's over there somewhere.
Already, may I go to the front?
Yeah.
All right.
The location is really ideal for that kind of expansion. The PB is an underutilized facility. Taking out the racquetball courts is one thing, they're not used, but there is a very, very large locker room located next to it that we can take that out as well.
Correct. The PEB building is very underutilized. So we are taking out the racquetball courts, but in the design process, we've already designed in a phase 2, which is taking over other space to further expand the program. The program was, as Lydia mentioned, is academics, professional development, mental health, and also some nutrition. We've actually scaled back significantly the nutrition piece, and we've had to scale back a bit of the professional development piece to to fully invest into the academics and mental health piece in the space we have. So if we get more money, we obviously can expand into the spaces that we've already partially designed into the building as a phase two. But there's other spaces in that building that is also primed for other additional expansion if we get a significant donation.
And the reason I'm bringing this up is we have been in dialogue with a potential donor that would provide a major cash gift to allow us to expand this significantly. And it will probably not coincide exactly with a Regents meeting. And so I just wanted to make sure that the board was aware that's not what we're approving now. We're approving exactly what Olivia presented, but we could come back to you very quickly and say, okay, we now have additional cash gift to allow us to make the facility twice the size or something like that. And we just may need to act quickly on that, depending on our contractors and others. So it's a good thing, but until you see the cash, we don't want to, kind of count on it.
I might, in an effort to redeem myself, I might say that if you and Leslie believe that it's prudent, we could come back to the Regents in January for increase in the project budget. And that would certainly allow us to move forward, and then we could come back later on with a design approval. So it doesn't really hold anything up because, we're just starting construction in January anyway. So that might help facilitate all that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Can I just make a?
Sorry to be disruptive.
That was good disruption. Thank you.
Yeah. So I just,
That's okay.
I just wanted to make a comment that Doug and I were at the tail end of a tour when the Champions Center was celebrated, I think was the word that we used. And Mitch did a phenomenal job. So he went through statistics, 1 in 4 utilized mental health pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, 3 in 4 student athletes are using mental health services, and that across the sports athletic kind of field for students, 50% consider suicide. And we both stood there and we watched the other donors that were in the room in this tour, and the questions were, how do we expand this? The need is there. How do we show up and help you? And it was really brilliantly done to not only share the need and really ways in which we all felt that in that moment, but then also quickly segue into, this is how you can help us meet that need beyond what you've already said yes to. So I just want to applaud the team because there were a lot of side conversations that were happening, like, okay, well, could we do this? Could we do that? So hopefully we not only are seeing new donors, but we're seeing enhanced donor participation because they're understanding very clearly what we need and how they can step up and help. So I just thought the team effort was just really great. Thank you.
Excellent. Next, all right, our next project is the USDA ARS center that replaces Johnson Hall, which was torn down in the last year, and we've actually broken ground on the new facility that is expected to begin construction in the winter of this year. It's about a 2-year construction process. You heard from our architects AMD back at the September meeting. Olivia?
Yes, so we are here to follow up on the future action from September to ask for your approval to, approving the design for the building. I would remind you again that the action we've come to you so far is approving the demolition of Johnson with state funds, approving the ground lease. The project is managed by the Corps of Engineers using the federal design build process. And we actually have been retained as a local representative of ARS. And so we're monitoring the project for ARS. The contract is, again, design build, so the contractor is Hensel Phelps. Hensel Phelps is a Western regional contractor. The work itself is coming out of the Seattle office. The architect, as Leslie said, is AMD out of Denver. And their design, as you saw last time, tries to be very compatible and responsive, respective to the architectural vocabulary that is in the rec complex itself. So happy to take questions.
Just could you remind the group that the significant investment that we're going to
yes.
be part of?
Yes,
Yes.
so the original appropriation from Congress to USDA ARS was 104.9 million. Then there was lobbying from stakeholders for $20 million more so that we could accommodate as much of the program as possible. So it's really 125 million essentially in a single project.
Any
Are there
further
other
questions? Okay, all right, cool. Well, we are going to move forward, Olivia, and thank you so much again for all of you and your team's efforts.
May I just again, I think Jason is still sitting there to recognize.
He's trying to run.
Well, he was.
Yeah.
Oh, he left. Okay, well, never mind.
No questions.
I love it.
He's back.
Jason, Jason gave you all a tour of the life sciences. He's got the athletics projects. He's got also ARS. So we've been trying to clone him and it didn't work. So we've just been working him to death and he's just fabulous.
Jason.
So I would turn it back to Leslie.
Thanks, Olivia.
All right, bye.
Bye, thank you. So our next topic are the proposed amendments to the WSU Voluntary Investment Program. And so I would like to invite our Vice President and Chief Human Resource Officer, Teresa Elliott Chesley.
And we also have Ann Monroe joining us and leads benefits for the university. Hey.
Oh, I'll go ahead and go. Good afternoon. Thank you for your time. We met last session to talk about a future action item. And this will be an action item with just some proposed changes to our voluntary plan associated with the Secure 2.0 Act. Just as a brief overview, in order to make changes to our 403B plans that we offer to the university, which is our required WSURP plan, no changes on today's agenda for that, and the voluntary 403B plan. Both of those are defined contributions. Our voluntary plan is fully employee funded. There are no employer matching funds to that. It's fully voluntary as well. So individuals that wish to participate can, but nobody is required to participate. Under Secure 2.0, initially, we drafted changes to implement the fact that the IRS and under Secure 2.0, it was saying that in January of 2024, anybody that earned more than $145,000 this year could only do their catch-up contributions as Roth contributions. The IRS sent out a notice in August saying that they were going to establish a 2-year transition period, but we did build that into and acknowledge it in our plan document, which is one of the things that you will see in the marked up document that you have. The other big change was hardship withdrawals. Previous to Secure 2.0, we as an employer had to ensure under a safe harbor that somebody truly was in a hardship in order to do a hardship withdrawal from the voluntary plan. The legislation turned that into self-certification. So our plan document was updated to reflect that self-certification. Since the document was open, I also took advantage to do some just general housekeeping things. For example, we reflected the new contribution limits, the fact that the required minimum distribution age is increasing, et cetera. So those are basically some housekeeping items. So I'm bringing this forward to you guys today. We're bringing it forward as requesting you to approve the document that will go into effect as of January 1, 2024.
I want to reiterate that Ann mentioned that there is no employer contribution with the voluntary plan. That means that there is no university liability. So we don't accrue a liability on our financial statement for folks to participate in this. The other point that I want to make is the transition to Roth, which is why that's been delayed, is because Roth vehicles have to be set up. We already have a Roth vehicle, so we were already ahead of the game there. People could choose to make that change now if they wanted to. It would not be wise to do it from a tax standpoint. But that's okay.
Unless you'd like a pot of money in the future that's non-taxable. So it does have a perk, but anyway. But yes, we already had a Roth option, so we were ready to go. And but we're ready to wait too, so that's fine. Any questions? Well, I thank you for your time. And in light of the season, I wish you all happy open enrollment.
Anne took advantage of being here on the Vancouver campus yesterday and today to help with open enrollment here. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you all.
Okay, we have one final future action item, and it's with regards to the lease space for WSU's Institute for Northwest Energy Futures. And Matt is back, as well as our WSU Tri-Cities Chancellor, Sandra Haynes.
And there she comes. And I'm just going to turn it over to you, please.
Okay, well, this, as you recall from our September meeting, in the operating budget for the state, we received about $3.8 million a year to form the new Institute for Northwest Energy's Futures at WSU Tri-Cities. Really excited about this new funding that will provide funding for faculty and staff and operations of the new institute, as well as enables us to acquire new space for the facility. So this action item would authorize and delegate to the president or his designee to commence a lease to purchase agreement to acquire this essential office space near the Tri-Cities campus. The lease will be for 4 years with total payments made during that 4-year period not to exceed $5.4 million. All of those payments made annually with the funds that were provided in the operating budget. That $5.4 million, of course, excludes closing costs and the annual operations and maintenance of the facility, which will also be paid for using the new state funds. So that's the action item. I thought we'd give just a couple more details that might be of interest. We're actively in negotiations with the building lessor. Those are going very well. We met with them again this week. We anticipate signing the contract after your authorization very soon and completing our inspection of the property and the ground. The building, which is located, would you describe it? Kind of diagonal to the Wine Science Center?
I would call it directly diagonal to the Wine Science Center, yes.
Perfect. The building size is just over 17,000 square feet on over 5 acres of land and was built in 2011. So pretty excited about the facility, and it is a facility that the Tri-Cities campus has leased off and on over the years to flex their space needs. So we think it'll be a great thing.
That 5.4, I'm sorry, I'm just looking here. Does that include any kind of tenant improvements or anything that needs to be done to adapt the building for any kind of specific usage?
Yeah, great question. The 5.4 million is the lease to own payments total over 4 years. Would not include any tenant improvements that we'd make.
The building is pretty ready to move in. As Matt said, we have leased it before. We know we are pretty sure we know the condition that it's in. That will depend on, of course, the inspection piece to know exactly what it's in. It will meet our needs. There is a relatively large high bay in the space, and also 2 wet labs already in the space, and a great deal of office space, which will actually exceed the needs of what we have for the Institute for Northwest Energy Futures, and will provide a space moving into the future. From what we can tell, most of the tenant improvements at this point would be things like carpet, paint, etc. And again, we'll see more if there's something in the inspection.
We're buying the land as well.
We are buying the land as well, which is a bonus.
Would we be able to expand and build on that land?
Yes.
Ultimately, if we wanted to.
Yes. We are also looking, by the way, at perhaps being subleasing some of that space to a local hydrogen company. That would also help with the payments moving forward on the building. So we've got a lot of plans and some fundraising in the works as well.
Triple net charges, operating expenses are in addition to this.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. It's an exciting program. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was our last action item. So those will go to the board tomorrow, and that concludes the Finance and Administration Committee meeting. I'll turn it back over to you, Chair Shell.
Well done, Regent Ramos. That might be
Thank you, Leslie.
the fastest finance committee had. We are actually so early that our scheduled reception isn't ready to go yet, but I suspect that the regions that have started the day relatively early could utilize a few minutes for a break. So I am going to go ahead and call the meeting adjourned. The Board of Regents will reconvene for our regular meeting tomorrow, Friday, November 17th at 8 a.m. in this room. Appreciate everyone being here. Thank you.